Yeah, guys, and foremost, AEW Insider, who have released the full report detailing how the situation after All Out developed.
Let's see what all the hype is about. Much of a sparkling water guy. 4 calories. Wow. 1 gram of carbs. If that's how that works. Oh my God. I see why he cussed out his coworkers. That is disgusting. Yo, no. Ugh. We are here today to, this is something I've been working on for a very long time. And you've been paying attention to the channel for a long time or any significant amount of time. You will know that this channel basically blew up off of this whole entire situation. It's a shame. It's a shame. Me personally, I'm happy this situation happened because I have the platform that I have now. But honestly, as a wrestling fan, I think it's better if this didn't happen, but you know, here we are now. I mean, I have NXT on in the background as we speak, and CM Punk is on the show. Like they just filmed a skit. CM Punk and Triple H and Shawn Michaels all just filmed a skit. What is this reality? Like, what timeline are we in? I would like to think that, you know, this is what is supposed to happen. I would like to think that this is the reality we should have been living in 7-8 years ago, but we had to go to that place to get to this one. Word to Eminem. It sucks. It sucks that we had to go through all of this in this event that I will be telling you all about today. It is what it is. So enjoy this video that me and my editor put together for you. We appreciate your time. We appreciate you clicking on this video. And sit back, relax, grab a snack. It's going to be a while. Sit back, relax. It's going to be a while. Kick back, you know what I'm saying? Probably throw me on while you're cleaning your room that you ain't clean and you've been saying that you go do it for a while. Now, like, you see I got the sideburns popping? You see I got the sideburns popping? Y'all ain't know I could grow sideburns, did y'all? It's water, YouTube. Don't worry. No, I'm not. No, I can't. Speaking for me personally, the last year of my life has been dominated by the circus that is pro wrestling. And to be fair to the individuals I'll be talking about today, how could it not be? It's a sport where you punch your coworkers in the face, drop them on their heads, and sometimes even spit on them. It's an environment that's going to lead to jealousy, anger, and to put it quite frankly, just overall dumb shit. Enter AEW. Now, if you know me, you know I didn't watch AEW until a certain muffin gobbler and terrible drinker joined the company. At first, I didn't have any negative feelings towards the company. I actually had no idea what it was at all. When All Out, the event that led to the creation of AEW, was announced, I was entering my senior year at a new high school. My 2 favorite rappers had passed away in a 3-month span, and I had to get used to a new environment. I had no interest in wrestling whatsoever. I had no idea who Adam Page was. I was a big fan of Cody Rhodes, but I had lost track of that TV show a long time ago. I've heard of the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega and the Bullet Club, but I had no idea what the Elite was. To be honest, up until about a year ago, I thought Tony Khan and Nick Khan were brothers. As time went on, though, somewhere down the line, I got back into wrestling. After fan highlights such as Kofi Mania, Edge's return after 9 years of retirement, and the debut at a Firefly Funhouse, I was getting more and more invested in the wrestling. Although I have fond memories of these events, the aftermath of them reminded me why I stopped watching wrestling in the first place. Such as lackluster championship reign capped off by Kofi Kingston losing his WWE championship to Brock Lesnar in less time than it took for me to write out this sentence, or Edge having an hour-long asthma attack of a match with Randy Orton in no crowd whatsoever, and Vince McMahon ruining the greatest wrestling gimmick since The Undertaker and Bray Wyatt's The Fiend. And when he tried to make it up to Bray Wyatt, he threw a world title on a character who didn't need it in the first place, just for him to lose that said title to Grandpa Bill Goldberg in less time it took for me to type out Grandpa Bill Goldberg. It was a very long time since anything in wrestling made me feel like a kid again for a sustained amount of time. That was until the boy, the tribal chief, Roman Reigns returned and finally turned heel. And I can't stress enough how big of a deal it was for Roman Reigns to turn heel. If you were around that John Cena time, people were begging John Cena to be a bad guy, and it never happened. So when Roman Reigns was basically the next John Cena, we were just expecting to have to just go through the same thing for another 20 years. But when he returned in 2020, after taking a sabbatical due to COVID, he returned with a new look. He had fully grown out the beard. He didn't do the goatee anymore. He had new teeth, and he looked bigger. And then he had Paul Heyman with him, and it was just amazing. Like, it was good. Like, very fucking good. So I got back into wrestling. Something told me to check out what AEW was doing. Then I see Tony Khan, and then Then I see Chris Jericho out of shape and falling off cages into cardboard, and I'm like, Then I see Cody Rhodes taking a chair shot to the head, and I'm like, I'm good, until I see this picture. Then rumors start swirling that Punk is returning to the ring. Not for WWE, but for AEW. I immediately felt the feeling that I can only explain as cautious optimism. To put things into perspective, old Punker has been out of wrestling for 7 years, and every other day there was a clickbait article from WWEWhatCulture.com or a video from Sean's View Entertainment, shout out to you by the way, saying that Punk was coming back. So of course I had my doubts, but they did it. The madman Tony Khan managed to give wrestling fans the one thing they've been wanting more than anything for the last 7 years. And just like Roman Reigns, it was good. Like, very fucking good. For about 9 months. Remember when I said wrestling breeds jealousy, anger, and dumb shit? Here's what happens when all three combine and go unchecked. I think to really understand the significance of this event, we have to peel the cap back on AEW's origins. AEW, no matter what anyone says, was built around the vision of two people, Tony Khan, and whether he even knew it or not, CM Punk. Think of AEW like the headquarters of the revolution, where all the people who were either rejected by WWE or rejected WWE themselves made a home for themselves. Now, AEW diehards would probably call this blasphemy for reasons I'll go on and explain later, but about 4 to 5 years ago, even they'd admit this revolution began on June 27, 2011 in Las Vegas when CM Punk sat cross-legged on top of that stage and then proceeded to cut one of the most, if not the most, impactful promos in wrestling history. Nowadays, this promo would just be another good promo, but at the time, it was groundbreaking. To put into context, this promo was done at the height of the PG era, and I can't stress enough how policed and overly scripted everything was in WWE at the time. WWE's writers would write what you said, what facial expressions you made, when you made them. I wouldn't even be surprised if there was times where they tried to script what you thought. There was no cursing, no mention of other wrestling companies. You couldn't even say hospital. You had to say local medical facility. To be fair, I think they still say that today, but it's fucking ridiculous. Like, just say hospital. So when Punk cut this promo, it was, to put it lightly, a breath of fresh air, and it worked. Punk immediately became a mainstream star, reaching a level of fame that only a few wrestlers have seen. I'm talking the likes of Stone Cold, The Rock, John Cena, Hulk Hogan, Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Triple H. This promo bumped him up to that status. He was never meant to be that guy though. WWE at every level he was at seen no potential in him, being no more than second place. And to be fair to WWE, how could they not? He was the first of his kind. Yes, there was independent stars before him to come into WWE to have success, but none of them reached the heights in the independents or in WWE that Punk did. Punk was the catalyst for the biggest independent promotion in Ring of Honor that gave a foundation for the stars we love today, such as Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, Bryan Danielson, running out of breath, Seth Rollins, Jon Moxley, formerly known as Dean Ambrose of The Shield. Punk literally crawled and walked so these guys could run and fly. But when Punk left in 2014, the revolution was all but dead. I mean, yeah, you had those aforementioned names such as Seth Rollins, Daniel Bryan, and Kevin Owens eventually make it to the top and hold World Championship gold. But if we're being honest, they were just placeholders till the biggest stars of yesteryear were ready to come back and take the throne. Then came Tony Khan, who, much like Punk and the names mentioned before, looks like someone you come across every day. Just a normal guy with a dream and the balls to go after it. To be honest though, in Tony Khan's case, he did have the checkbook as well, but that's neither here nor there. With said checkbook though, Tony Khan has the ability to make a company in his vision. And unfortunately, if you ask 100 people what is AEW's identity or vision, you'll get 100 different answers. Some people say it's sports-based wrestling. Some will say it's everything WWE isn't. And my man Jim Cornette would say it's indie outlaw mud show wrestling. And in a way, all of those answers would be correct. But one thing I think we all could agree on is this company was built around the prospect of CM Punk being its main character. Punk was supposed to be AEW's quarterback. He was supposed to be their point guard, what LeBron James is to the NBA. Fuck it. He was supposed to be their John Cena. That didn't work out though. In 2019, things fell apart for God knows why, but it led to the Revolution stifling. Yes, you have these independent stars and legends such as Chris Jericho, but said independent stars are just stars to a niche audience, and Chris Jericho from 2 decades ago, or even a decade ago, or even half a decade, not even a year ago. Chris Jericho is bad. So you can't depend on Chris Jericho to bring you to the heights that AEW needs to be to compete with WWE or just even uphold a revolution. So as time goes on and ratings slightly decrease and overall interest in this company is dying, the revolution is fizzling out at worst and not moving forward at best. That was all until Punk basically came in, and they gonna hate to hear this, but saved the day. When Punk comes in, AEW immediately shoot up to a new level, getting coverage from major outlets, sold out an NBA arena on a rumor for the B show Rampage. By the way, while simultaneously WWE's 2 biggest stars, Roman Reigns and John Cena, are having a face-off before their bout at WWE's 2nd biggest pay-per-view, SummerSlam, Punk is on the other channel selling out an NBA arena and drawing the highest ratings on the B show has ever had and haven't even come close to duplicating since. Again, this is all on a rumor. It was never confirmed that Punk was coming back to wrestling, let alone AEW. To be fair to Punk's haters, though, this was heavily teased and very much the worst kept secret, but still, you know what I'm saying? Like, Punk would debut for AEW, and it was an amazing debut. He gave out ice cream bars. You have to go back and watch this promo. It's just, looking back at it, it's too sad for me as a wrestling fan to watch it because AEW should be competing with WWE, but, you know, it was an amazing debut. And he went on to have an amazing match with Darby Allin, immediately boosting him up as one of AEW's new biggest stars. And Punk would continue to go on and do this. Although Punk proved his star power, he had no problem working the undercard, often appearing on the B show, or if he was on the main show, Dynamite, he would be in the middle, rarely involving himself in the main event. But of course, eventually he would have to take his rightfully place as the head of the table in AEW. This time would come about 9 months into his AEW career, where things were going great. He just came off an all-time feud with MJF. Me personally, I think the best feud in AEW history, the best program in AEW history, some of the best character work in wrestling, period. It was amazing, and I think it's something that even if you aren't a wrestling fan, you can enjoy because it mixed real life stuff in with this crazy world of wrestling. Me personally, I really enjoy it, and even after all this aftermath, I can still go back and watch that feud and enjoy it and notice new things, and that's the beautiful part of wrestling in this controlled world. Him and MJF really took advantage of that, and they both became bigger stars because of it. So not only is he the biggest star in the company, he's red hot. People are yearning for CM Punk. I'm using yearning. People actively want him, so it's time for him to take his crown. And if I can, I'll apply articles somewhere on the screen. Punk didn't even want the world title, but Tony Khan really wanted him to have it. Damn, Tony. Unfortunately, yes, it made sense for Punk to be the world champion. It's just unfortunately who he had to take it from. Punk's time would unfortunately come 9 months into his AEW career, where he would challenge AEW world champion and more notably best friend and former member of the Elite, Hangman Adam Page. This would be, unfortunately, where shit hits the fan, and this is why we are where we are now. Now, in my original draft of this script, I left out the Elite's origin story, and that's because I really don't know it. I could tell you Punk's story like the back of my hand, but going into this, I didn't know much about the other side of this story. Upon further thought, though, I think it's very important to give context to these 5 gentlemen, as AEW, for better or for worse, would not be where they are without them. I remember always hearing about the independent stars, such as Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. There would be a time where Cody Rhodes dominated the news cycle and would be all you hear about in the independents, but that would come at a time where I personally wasn't that involved in wrestling, but even I could not escape the buzz these guys were making on the independents. I'm sure fans of theirs look at this time very fondly, as this very well may have been their peak, and it really stems from this group called the Bullet Club. You may have seen their logo on a t-shirt. I know I have on a few occasions, which is actually kind of crazy because I've never even seen the Austin 316 shirt in public. From that group, though, a subgroup called the Elite will form in January of 2016, with the OGs of the group being Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. Then further down the line in October of 2018, 2 people who you can make the argument caused the craziest domino effects in wrestling history would join the staple. These two men being Cody Rhodes and Hangman Adam Page. On one hand, you got Cody Rhodes. Now in 2024, he's a back-to-back Royal Rumble winner, one of 2 wrestlers to main event 3 WrestleManias in a row, and is a current WWE champion. This wasn't always his trajectory, though. At one time, he was just a stooge for Randy Orton, and along the way, somehow became the understudy for his brother, Goldust, when he was cursed with the gimmick of Stardust by WWE. He would eventually take his career into his own hands in May of 2016 when he announced on Twitter that he requested his release from WWE, which was crazy because, again, this company was so policed at the time that they monitored everything you tweeted. For somebody to just request their release and then not even be granted it, but then like let the crowd know like, yo, I want to leave. So of course he would be granted his release. And this would go on to be the greatest decision he could ever make, because if he never left, he would have been Kofi Kingston, a career mid-carder who may or may not have one reign as champion if he's lucky. Now, that's no disrespect to Kofi Kingston, but like I said earlier in the video, we all know how that ended for Kofi Kingston. Cody Rhodes really deserves a lot of the credit for the formation of AEW even existing, as he really was hands-on behind the scenes with the formation, famously or infamously taking a bet with wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer that indie wrestlers such as the Elite could not sell 10,000 tickets to a pay-per-view, which that pay-per-view would go on to sell those 10,000 tickets and would inspire Tony Khan to create AEW. I'm not sure if it's a hot take or not. I plan on explaining this idea further in a different project, but he really was the glue that held everything together. I don't believe it's a coincidence that everything goes to shit just 2 months after he announces he's leaving for WWE. And at the same time Cody is leaving AEW to join WWE, the other star who joined the Elite with him in 2018, Hangman Adam Page, is currently AEW World Champion. At this time, Adam Page was really only known to a niche audience who watched the independent wrestling scene. Unlike his counterparts, the Young Bucks, who made a name for themselves, often being regarded as the best tag team in the world, and Kenny Omega often being regarded as the best wrestler in the world, Adam Page was really AEW's first homemade star. And it wasn't by accident either. Adam Page was involved in a long-term story that saw him deal with the battles of alcoholism and constantly letting people down around him, which led to him actually being betrayed by the Elite and kicked out of the group. This would lead to him arguably being the biggest babyface in AEW, where the fans would always root for him to get his shit together, and he actually would eventually get his shit together, where he would eventually defeat his former tag team partner and co-tag team champion Kenny Omega to become the AEW World Champion. It was a beautiful story, as even I, who hadn't been paying attention to AEW that much, was rooting for him to win. Unfortunately, this would be the peak of his reign though, as even AEW diehards would be hard-pressed to call this reign anything but underwhelming. A mixture of bad booking and the crowd's focus being pointed towards what I believe, again, best thing to happen to AEW, CM Punk and MJF's feud, that literally lasted the entire reign, and some interview answers that would really backfire. More on that later.
I think you listen to it.
Adam Page really fell from grace, and in hindsight, it may be the catalyst for him doing something that would change the trajectory of wrestling forever. After coming out on top in his all-time feud with MJF, Punk was ready to move on to the main event scene. Up until this point, there was little to no drama. Everything seemed peaceful, business was booming, people were smiling, and things were only getting better. Until this feud. Suddenly, the energy around Punk seemed to shift. There was always rumors that Punk wasn't well liked or even wanted in the first place in AEW, but it never felt as valid as it did when the Punk and Adam Page story began. Suddenly, there were negative headlines coming out about Punk, rumors of backstage drama, and fans on social media campaigning against him beating Page for the championship. It didn't help that the build to their match was so, fucking weird. It's weird. That's the only way I can really put it. To explain it briefly, Punk was very respectful to the champion, but Adam Page suddenly had an entire attitude and gimmick change, becoming more and more angry, behaving more like a heel than a babyface. It felt as if a feud between the two had already happened and somehow we missed the climax. But boy, If things were confusing before, things were about to become even fucking worse. Again, speaking to the audience who don't know what's going on, Punk and Adam had a planned segment on the Go Home show for Double or Nothing in which they would have a promo battle. According to Punk, there was dialogue that was planned, but when they got out there, Adam went completely off script. And not in a blur those lines kind of way, like a what the fuck is this guy talking about kind of way. It was so bad that at best you thought he forgot his lines, and at worst he was having withdrawals from no porn and was trying his best teenage edgelord impression. To put into context what was said, Punk had a falling out with his former best friend Colt Cabana, which led to a lawsuit. What exactly happened between the two up until this point is unclear, but it led to them not speaking for half a decade, even though Colt worked for AEW as well. According to Punk, Colt has allegedly made an attempt to talk to Punk backstage at a show, but Punk refused to talk to Colt without a lawyer present, showing just how bad the relationship had soured at this point. And meanwhile, over in WWE, Sasha Banks and Naomi have just walked out of WWE. We still don't, like, to this day, we still don't know exactly why. They've alluded to just the way Vince McMahon and his best friend and just piece of shit John Laurinaitis was speaking to him, and you could imagine how they were. Just look at these guys. Editors show a picture, obviously showing love for them because he was the original guy to walk out of WWE. Adam Page basically called him out for this and called him out for not being for workers' rights when that's like kind of Punk's whole thing. Like Punk's whole thing was, I'm the workers guy. I'm for the boys. I'm for workers' rights. Like he wore the, I know this later down the line, but he wore the Writers Guild thing. Again, editors show a picture here. Punk's whole identity was fuck the system. He was the rebel. So for you to attack him and basically say like he's not for workers' rights, you're attacking Punk's whole aura. You're attacking Punk's whole foundation. And Adam was basically blaming Punk for getting Colt fired from AEW. Adam Page, who was close friends with Colt Cabana, even formed an alliance with the group that Colt was a part of, the Dark Order. At one point, the Dark Order was a staple of AEW, but by the time Punk joined the company in August of 2021, they were irrelevant, to put it lightly. Mostly just being non-consequential matches on Dynamite. That goes double for Colt Cabana, who was often just seen standing in the background of the group. To be fair to Adam, Colt would stop appearing on TV around the same time Punk would join the company, and AEW does have a history of taking wrestlers off of television when a new star joins the company that has had problems with a wrestler before. Most recently, Sammy Guevara disappeared from television when Mercedes Moné, formerly known as Sasha Banks, ironically, joined the company. Sammy had gotten in trouble for a past disgusting tweet targeted at Mercedes. I'm not going to say what he said. You could imagine. He was suspended in 2020 when a 2016 tweet was brought up. Mercedes joined AEW in March of 2024, and around the same time, Sammy Guevara was once again suspended for not following concussion protocol when Jeff Hardy suffered a broken nose in their match, and the two would proceed to finish the match anyway. Now again, given his prior history, this seems like more of a fireable offense, especially given Guevara's past suspensions, but he was only suspended for an unspecified amount of time, not returning until August 5 months later, but not for AEW, but AEW's sister company, Ring of Honor, which is like AEW's G League. So it's not too crazy to assume Tony Khan would fire Colt Cabana to make Punk comfortable. The problem comes in though when you realize Colt was never fired, just placed on Ring of Honor just like Guevara. Even if you're still skeptical on the timing, it is extremely irresponsible to jump the gun on the last show before the pay-per-view to accuse the company's biggest star of something so heinous. If he was a bad guy in the feud, this could be passable, but to tarnish the reputation of the biggest good guy right before his crowning moment is ridiculous to say the least. Not to mention the said pay-per-view that the rivals were set to main event was AEW's first $1 million gate. So to go off script on a promo battle on the last show before the biggest pay-per-view was idiotic to say the least. The number one rule amongst professional wrestlers is to protect your opponent, whether in a match or on the microphone. You'll often hear wrestlers bigging up their opponents by saying their accomplishments or praising their skills. I don't know what Punk and Adam had planned, but neither of them came out of that looking clean. Even though in hindsight, Punk gave us one of the hardest off-the-cuff lines, in promo history and still went on to take the planned punch at the end of the segment, fighting the urge in his own words to use his UFC training and double leg takedown him. Punk's reputation was slowly being tarnished right before our eyes.
He proceeds to go on live TV and not say any of the shit that we talked about. I can't hear him because the crowd's so loud, and I'm looking at him, and I have to really pay attention to what he's saying because my responses matter. I can't just say what I had planned because it's not going to match what he's saying to me. And he's saying some shit, and I don't know what he's talking about.
Even me, as a Punk fan, like, come on, I got the shirt, who was not even hip to the backstage politics, was looking at Punk a little different. And in terms of Punk's reputation, this was just the first blow on what would begin basically a civil war in AEW. According to Punk, he would confront Adam Page backstage, where Adam admitted that this was all about the alleged firing of Colt Cabana. It's unclear whether or not Adam would go on to apologize to Punk, but it led to Punk going to the owner of the company, Tony Khan, and his legal team and telling him to handle that. Like, handle that. He basically said, I don't know if I got the snap off. Did I get the snap off? I got a snap off. I used to not be able to snap. As far as we know, there was no consequences for Adam's actions, which only frustrated Punk more. Get used to hearing that. The Rivals will go on to have their match at the pay-per-view the following weekend, a match that Punk feels was garbage due to him having his guard up. And as somebody who stepped in the ring and has a lot of experience, I can't blame him. If I can't trust you to protect me on the microphone, how can I trust you can protect me coming off the top rope or slamming me on the mat? This would unfortunately be the case in a match where Adam somehow, he chipped his tooth on a chop to the chest. Like, you know them chops, you know what I'm saying? If I do that, and this is your chest, I'm aiming for your chest. Your teeth is up here, dog. Like, I don't know. Punk would go on to win the match famously in tears and ready to put the feud behind him. Unfortunately, though, he may have been too excited. As on his first appearance as champion, during his entrance, he would jump into the crowd as he would on multiple occasions, but this time breaking his goddamn foot against the guardrail. Like, what was this? 3 years ago now? Two years ago? Yeah, I don't think a 44-year-old should be crowd surfing. So, yeah, he broke his foot. It's unclear how bad the damage was at this time, but he definitely didn't help it by going to complete his scheduled tag team match where he did moves such as a springboard clothesline, which I can only imagine made things much, much worse. I remember vividly seeing a backstage photo of Punk and his teammates in that tag match, FTR. In the photo, Punk had one boot on and the other boot off with no sock. I remember thinking that Punk is hurt. Then came some off-the-air footage where Punk would chase his former rival MJF out of the ring after MJF just cut his own version of the pipe bomb. In that video, Punk still had one boot off and one sock and was visibly limping. I'm not sure if this was due to me not being in the dirt sheets and the wrestling sites, but as far as I remember, the injury was a well-kept secret. The only news we got on it was Punk's last tweet to this day, where he says he will address his future in the next episode of Dynamite. Punk would famously come out on that show with a plain white t-shirt, tears in his eyes, and a very bad limp. He announced that he broke his foot and would have to relinquish the world championship. This was a huge blow, not only for CM Punk fans, but Tony Khan as well. Like I said, Punk was supposed to be the John Cena of this company. The plans revolved around him. As AEW wanted to recreate the summer of Punk that was so successful nearly 2 decades ago in Ring of Honor, Punk would go off to rehabilitate his injury, and even though the plans in AEW came to a sudden stop, the attack on his character and reputation was just getting started. Popular wrestling media personality and alleged Punk water carrier, Ibu of Wrestling Purists, believes this was the worst case scenario for Punk. All he could do was sit around at home and see fans on social media turn on him, and his doubters relish in his downfall. Not to mention this Colt Cabana story was still a major topic amongst wrestling journalists, namely the man whose tweet basically set up AEW in the first place, old Dave Meltzer, Uncle Dave as some people will call him. If you're unaware of who Dave Meltzer is, let me just say I'm jealous of you. Dave Meltzer is the founder and editor of the Wrestling Observer. If you've ever heard of the star ratings in a wrestling match, they most likely came from Meltzer. It's no secret Meltzer has a close relationship with AEW's EVPs and owner Tony Khan. I used to always hear about these star ratings as a teenager and wonder why none of my favorite wrestlers achieved a 5-star rating. Meltzer obviously had a bias towards the style of wrestling that AEW produced, as WWE only received a single 5-star match between 1997 and 2018. Ironically, that one 5-star match being John Cena versus CM Punk at the 2011 Money in the Bank pay-per-view. To put this in perspective though, AEW in its 5-year existence has 32 5-star matches to this day. And let me tell you who was wrestling between 1997 in 2018. That means The Rock has no 5-star matches. Kurt Angle has no 5-star matches in WWE. That means I don't think I think up until recently, AJ Styles didn't have any. Randy Orton didn't have any. I think to this day, he doesn't have any 5-star matches. And this was like the Bible to wrestling fans. And I'm going totally off script here, but I will never forgive the internet wrestling community for giving this dude a platform. Not even a platform, just platforming it so much. Like, you got to understand, the Wrestling Observer was like the Grammys for wrestling. I guess y'all know how ridiculous the Grammys is. I mean, Macklemore won over Drake and Kendrick Lamar. So no offense to Macklemore, but even Macklemore admitted he shouldn't. I'm getting way off. Anyway, at the time, Meltzer's close relationship with the higher-ups in AEW was only a harmless relationship or friendship between media personality and athlete. At that point, that would only really bother you if you really cared that much about what some random out-of-touch ass man had to say about wrestling. But when it comes to the point where he's spreading backstage information and lies according to Punk, and if you're Punk, how could you not believe the higher-ups in AEW are against you? Two of the EVPs, the Young Bucks, have a move literally called the Meltzer Driver. Given the fact that Meltzer was leading the charge and pushing the narrative that Punk was causing trouble backstage, and Adam Page, another one of the Bucks' close friends, literally said it on live television, how could you not put 2 and 2 together if you're Punk and get 4? The injury was so bad that Punk admitted he felt like he let everyone down. Not only could he not fulfill the plan of the Summer of Punk for Tony and the fans, but he felt as if he let his own family down, as he couldn't even give his little Larry. He couldn't give little Larry a walk, man. He couldn't even take little Larry for a walk. And we showing him a picture now, but like, come on, man. You couldn't give this little adorable dude a walk. That would break my heart. All of this put together meant that Punk's back was against the wall. And if you know Punk and you've been paying attention to Punk like I've been paying attention to Punk, you know this Punk is a very dangerous dude. For everyone, if you're unfamiliar with Punk, he's been known as someone who will fire back when his back is against the wall. His WWE run, for example, in 2014, CM Punk in hindsight was a shell of himself. He looked sick, he looked tired, and that's because he was. I truly believe, whether Punk will admit it or not, AEW broke his heart. And whether he will admit it or not, WWE did in 2014 as well. I think he just gave WWE more time than he gave AEW, because he gave WWE 9-8 years of his life. So he went through it with WWE, then he's seen it in AEW, and he's like, damn, it's the same shit. It's the same backstage politics. It's the same unprofessionalism. It's the same people not communicate. It's the same thing. In brighter news, Punk would return from his injury a few months later, but unfortunately this would not be the happy-go-lucky Punk we saw in his debut at AEW. This was the sick and tired Punk that we saw in 2014, just 8 years older. CM Punk would enter a feud with the interim world champion Jon Moxley, and this right here is one of, if not the best example of booking malpractice, as at the time, not only was Jon Moxley a babyface and one of the AEW originals, so Punk is returning a feud with another good guy who the AEW diehards love more, but Jon Moxley wasn't even under contract to AEW. Jon literally had this company by the throat. He had all the power. As he even said, he could have went back to WWE with the world championship.
Okay.
The entire summer, I was not under contract.
Right.
No contract. Free agent. I was at SummerSlam weekend wrestling fucking Desperado and shit the day of SummerSlam. Fucking suplexed him on a bunch of aluminum cans and shit, cut in half. It was fucking dope. I could have walked in a SummerSlam that night with the AEW fucking belt. if I had been so inclined. Nobody knew that because I don't put my shit out there in the world and let everybody know every fucking thing about my business, So I was not under contract. The night in
Cleveland.
fucking what's his dick's talking about, it was in Minneapolis. It was the night he came back and was hopping around on one foot and all that and bumping around Inner Circle or whatever after me and Jericho wrestled in a badass match, by the way. So we're talking later about stuff. Now, keep in mind, at this time, this is my whole point. I basically don't work there for all intents and purposes. I don't even work here. Tony is not my boss. I don't even have to be in this room. I don't have to do shit. So even me being in this room and offering and agreeing to a storyline that puts you over at the pay-per-view, if anything, I'm bending over backwards for Tony and for this dude and for the company and everybody. Because I didn't have to. I didn't have to do shit.
Right.
If anything, I was bending over backwards.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it.
Okay, so
With this leverage that Moxley possessed, he waged that to control the story he had in his feud with Punk. Moxley wanted to do a wrestling version of Rocky 3. Now, I've never seen any of the Rocky movies, and if it was as bad as this feud was, I have no plans of watching it anytime soon. And funny enough, Punk would admit that he didn't watch any Rocky films before this feud either, and he thought it was stupid. So I'd seen it. I'm like, what is this feud? This feud was bad. It was bad. A lot of it's on YouTube, but it didn't make any sense. According to Punk, Moxley refused to do anything else. He would not lose to Punk without getting a win first. Punk asked Tony if that's what he wanted to do, and Tony said yeah. Punk says he thought the idea was garbage, but listened to the boss. To put into perspective everything going on with Punk, he has Jon Moxley holding his spot hostage, Adam Page being a prick, we don't even know if he apologized for it, Tony Khan not holding himself accountable or anyone accountable, fans turning on him, and the media tarnishing his name. I've lost track of how much bullshit he's putting up with at this time. Punk would retaliate. And if y'all ever heard of the term don't pull Superman's cape or tug Superman's cape, whichever one it is, let's just say that's what AEW in the environment was doing to Punk. And it was about to get ugly for everyone involved. Me, you, fans, wrestlers, everyone. Because not even 2 weeks into his return, Punk went off script. After dealing with the foot injury for the entire summer, Punk would return in August to do the planned feud with Jon Moxley, looking a little more in shape, but just as, if not more, tired. He was silent for about 3 months, and the first time they gave him a microphone, he got some things off his chest. But not for his current on-screen rival, but his previous in-real-life rival and the man he beat for the World Championship, Hangman Adam Page. CM Punk will go into business for himself, much like Page did months earlier, and called Page to the ring, much to the confusion of the commentators who asked if Page was even in the building at the time. So of course Page would not come to the ring, and Punk will have a brilliant line where he says, that's not cowboy shit, that's coward shit, flipping Page's catchphrase on his head. Punk will go on to say the apology should be as loud as the disrespect, which adds to my confusion if Adam Page had ever even apologized ever, because that could be meaning two things. Does it mean that Adam Page never apologized, and when you do in the future, the apology needs to be as loud as the disrespect, like you better apologize to me publicly? Or is it saying that, yo, you apologized privately, but you embarrassed me publicly, so when you do apologize, it better be public? I don't know. And to this day, I still don't know. Punk would turn his attention to his on-screen rival, Jon Moxley, with some equally harsh words in the context of wrestling. At the time, I thought it was a bit weird in the context of wrestling. Again, I didn't know about the backstage rumors. I didn't know who Sean Ross Sapp was at the time. I didn't know who Ibu of Wrestling Purist was, and I wasn't exactly sure who Dave Meltzer was, and no offense to any of those guys, but I would really genuinely kill to go back to those days. I thought calling out Adam was weird as Punk wasn't even in wrestling gear, but I didn't think too much of it. I thought everything they were doing was a little weird. So, it's just a different company, I guess. I don't know. But it turns out, like I stated previously, Punk went into business for himself and people were pissed. This was the first time he gave people a valid reason to be upset with him, as this was a very immature thing to do. I understand that this may have been built up for about 3 months, coupled with all the other problems he had on top of people antagonizing him. Hangman did apologize, which again, I'm not sure if he did or not. You really have to let it go or at least handle it in a better way. Again, he is the leader at this point, and we would later learn down the line, spoiler alert, he was hired as a consultant to Tony Khan. Punk always wanted to be the locker room leader. Much given, much is expected. You have to take a lot of bullshit as a leader and handle it the right way. You're not expected to react as a sensitive person, although you have every right to react to us as a sensitive person. As a leader, you're not expected to react, if that makes sense. But again, who am I to say, though? I do believe there's no rule to reaction. So anyways, little did we know, though, this was just the tip of the iceberg in terms of CM Punk firing back, as Punk will go on to prove that he's the wrong person to antagonize and expect no consequences. Punk will go on to win his world championship back from Jon Moxley in his hometown at All Out 2022. Punk seemed to be in good spirits this night, as before the show you can see a video of his dog Larry running around the arena while Punk laughs, and even post-show he stayed overtime taking pictures and videos post-match, post-show, and post-injury. Yes, unfortunately, at some point during this match, most likely during the suicide dive, as you can see, he tries to test his arm by doing some push-ups similar how he would a year and a half later when he suffered the same exact injury on a different arm. Somewhere in between the arena and the post-show media scrum, someone would piss Punk off, just to put it frankly, as we would proceed to see one of, if not the greatest crash out in wrestling history. There was a media scrum, and before anyone could even ask a question, Punk decided now was the time to explode. Immediately, Punk would cut off the first person to ask a question while opening up a pack of sparkling water and muffins. I told y'all this would make sense later. I told y'all it's actually cold. Let's give it another try. It's been about a week. Maybe my taste buds are a little bit better, and it's a little bit colder. You know what? It's a little bit better cold. I think Punk had it when it was cold. I'm not sure. It's a little bit better. It still tastes like burp, but nah, that's awful. I'm sorry. No, that's not it, Chief. That's not it whatsoever. Ugh. Where was I at? Sorry, that shit just literally genuinely gave me a headache. The person asking the question was Nick Hausman, which may very be the reason he got pissed off in the first place. We didn't have a lot of clarity on what was going on backstage, but we knew the main problem stemmed from wrestlers in the AEW believing that Punk got Colt Cabana fired. It just so happens the first person to ask a question was a friend of Colt Cabana, as they used to do improv together. Punk, knowing this, assumed that Hausman was spreading the rumor, but Hausman would actually tell Punk that he was no longer friends with Cabana as well. Much to Punk's surprise, who would go on to apologize to Nick, Punk would then proceed to, for the first time, explain exactly what happened between him and Colt Cabana.
A lot of people.
Just say your name and your...
Cool. Hi, Nick Hausman with Wrestling Inc.
I'll start, Nick. Show of hands. Who here fancies themselves as a journalist? You're a journalist, Nick? All right.
I try my best.
Okay. No, real quick.
Go ahead.
You still do improv?
No, not a little bit.
No?
No.
When you did improv, who'd you do improv with?
I did it with Scott Colton.
Okay, so you fancy yourself a journalist. Would you say you're friends with Scott Colton?
No, I haven't talked to Scott in some time.
So you're not friends with him?
No, Scott and I do not see eye to eye.
Oh, wow. Well, that makes two of us. My point is, if you fancy yourself a journalist, even if it's for the silly world of professional wrestling, and you have journalistic integrity, people who report things, mostly that are bullshit, and slanderous lies against myself, if you are friends with somebody, you blew my spot. If you're not friends with them, I apologize.
It's okay.
But you should probably disclose who you're friends with.
I'm not friends with you.
I haven't
or
had
Scott.
anything to do with Scott Colton in almost a decade. Probably wanted nothing to do with him even longer than that. It's fucking unfortunate that I have to come up here and speak on this when I'm on my time and this is a fucking business. Why I'm a grown-ass adult man and I decide not to be friends with somebody is nobody else's fucking business. But my friends, if I fall backwards, will catch me. Scott Colton, I felt, never would have. My problem was I wanted to bring a guy with me to the top that did not want to see me at the top. Okay? You call it jealousy, you call it envy, whatever the fuck it is. My relationship with Scott Colton ended long before I paid all of his bills. I have every receipt, I have every invoice, I have every email. I have the email where he says, and I quote, "I agree to go our separate ways. I will get my own lawyer and you do not have to pay anymore." That's an email that I have. The only reason the public did not see is because when I finally had to countersue him through discovery, we discovered he shared a bank account with his mother. That's a fact. And as soon as we discovered that fact and we subpoenaed old Marcia, he sent the email, "Oh, can we please drop all this?"
To summarize though, Punk and Cabana was being sued by WWE and their former doctor after Punk exposed why he left the company, and the medical staff being the main reason why, in particular the doctor who was suing. Punk and Cabana would win the case, but somehow this would end their friendship, as sometime at the end of the case, the two former friends would agree to go their separate legal ways and have their own defensive teams, as according to Punk, he was paying both their fees. Colt would go on to sue Punk for this though, and in return Punk would countersue. And through this, Punk discovered that Colt shared a bank account with his mother. I don't know how to feel about that. Colt would request that they stop all of this after Punk had to subpoena Colt's mother. In the media scrum, Punk would express how disappointed he was that he had to explain his private falling out with a former best friend to protect his name. He would for the first time express his beef with the EVPs of AEW and best friends of Adam Page, the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, saying they should have known better than to spread false stories, and reprimanded them for besmirching his name to satisfy a niche audience. Then would say the EVPs couldn't run a fucking Target, which is hilarious.
Now, it's 2022. I haven't been friends with this guy since at least 2014, late 2013. And the fact that I have to sit up here because we have irresponsible people who call themselves EVPs and couldn't fucking manage a Target, and they spread lies and bullshit and put into a media that I got somebody fired when I have fuck all to do with him, want nothing to do with him, do not care where he works, where he doesn't work, where he eats, where he sleeps. And the fact that I have to get up here and do this in 2022 is fucking embarrassing. And if y'all are at fault, fuck you. If you're not, I apologize.
Punk would ask Dave Meltzer, who is friends of the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega and those guys, what he did to deserve an empty-headed, dumb fucking fuck like Hangman Adam Page to go on live television and to go into business for himself. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, he said that word for word, bar for bar. I am not adding anything. I couldn't add that. I couldn't come up with that myself. That's funny.
But what did I ever do in this world to deserve an empty-headed, fucking dumb fuck like Hangman Adam Page to go out on national television and fucking go into business for himself? For what? What did I do? Dave, what did I ever do?
You tell me.
Didn't do a goddamn thing. What's your name, sir?
Dominic D'Angelo.
Fuck the Pittsburgh Penguins. What are you doing? I'm from
Pittsburgh.
I made it really clear in Forbes, and I just want to make it clear again. Nick,
it's not his position to make it very fucking clear. There's people who call themselves EVPs that should have fucking known better. This shit was none of their business. I understand sticking up for your fucking friends. I fucking get it. I stuck up for that guy more than anybody. Okay? I paid his bills until I didn't, and it was my decision not to.
Yeah, but I shouldn't have no commented when Nick first said it. It's my fault, and if I hadn't, it's my fault.
Punk would admit to regretting giving Adam Page a receipt, going into business for himself, and calling him out on live television.
I appreciate that.
I should have just taken it head on because you never said anything.
But I'm trying to run a fucking business, and when somebody who hasn't done a damn thing in this business jeopardizes the first $1 million house that this company has ever drawn off of my back and goes on national television and does that, it's a disgrace to this industry, it's a disgrace to this company. Now, we're far beyond apologies, right? I gave him a fucking chance. It did not get handled, and you saw what I had to do, which was very regrettable, lowering myself to his fucking level. But that's where we're at right now. And I will still walk up and down this hallway and say, if you have a fucking problem with me, take it up with me. Let's fucking go. What's your question, Nick?
First of all, you're always very nice to me, and thank you.
I can't really do this entire thing justice, as every time I watch the debacle, I notice something new that you may not catch in the midst of watching it for the first time, such as Punk looking at both arms, realizing he's definitely hurt, or Punk using one of his drinks to ice his hip. And that's the best use for him, I'm gonna be honest, because they fucking are disgusting. Punk's constant interruptions, and most importantly, Tony Khan's reactions, ranging from uncomfortable and even sometimes nodding along, as Punk would confirm in the future nothing Punk said in the media scrum was new to Tony. He's expressed these frustrations before to Tony, but they never got handled, so Punk had to handle them himself. I think the best way to sum up this now infamous quote from Punker that I think we all can relate to, honestly: I'm hurt, I'm old, I'm fucking tired, and I work with children. I highly suggest everyone go back and watch this entire speech, because not only is it entertaining, I think it's a valuable lesson for all sides. On one hand, don't keep pushing someone, especially someone who doesn't need to put up with any nonsense or any bullshit. And on the other hand, although I understand why Punk had to defend himself, basically, as the leader of the roster, which he was at the time, you can't be the person to air out everyone like that. Unfortunately, you're held to a different standard, and Punk didn't live up to that standard on that night. Tony Khan learned this night that as the owner and as the one with all the power, you can't be too friendly with everyone. He let things get too unprofessional, and it's human nature for people to take advantage of stuff like that. And finally, the journalists, who I believe ruined wrestling, but that's a different project, they learned that in a business as unique as wrestling, where trust is everything, spreading information which is very sensitive about a coworkers feel about each other, it's going to 9 times out of 10, it's going to have negative impact on the business. And I wish we could have just moved on from here and let things just settle down. But as they say, things can't get any worse until they do. After his media scrum, Punk would head to his locker room, uncertain about his immediate future and his wrestling future in general. The exact details are murky, as slight spoiler alert, there are NDAs involved about what's about to happen, but the most common story seems to be that when Punk went back to his locker room, he was winding down with his dog Larry and his best friend and trainer's Ace Steel's wife, allegedly the 3 remaining members of the Elite and the EVPs, the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, along with AEW VP Mega Perk Angle. They allegedly buzzed down the door to confront Punk. The most common story is that it didn't take long for things to get physical, as Punk throws the first punch. This is where things get really scattered, but it seems for sure that Punk got the better end of the altercation, as a few highlights of the skirmish is allegedly one of the Bucks being knocked out by a punch from Punk, the other Buck catching a chair with his jaw that was thrown by Ace Steel, who ran into the locker room after hearing commotion to defend his best friend and his wife, who was in a walking boot at the time, and Kenny Omega being bit, like bite down, like there was a bite mark on his arm like week later. Like it was that bad. Either by Ace Steel, that's who my vote is, because Larry is like the cutest dog ever and wouldn't hurt a fly. So I highly doubt it was Larry. And speaking of Larry, he would allegedly be hit by the door that was bust open, losing teeth in the process. It should be mentioned though that Kenny Omega was there to try to keep the peace, attempting to break up the fight, taking Larry and removing him from the locker room fight. Omega would even go as far as having a conversation with Punk sometime after the fight to reconcile. One of the Bucks was allegedly yelling that it was their company. One thing that isn't alleged though is Chris Jericho, after all the aftermath and people winding down, and again Kenny Omega and CM Punk having a talk or whatever, Chris Jericho would call CM Punk a locker room cancer. Chris Jericho isn't really one to talk about someone who being a locker room cancer in AEW, but again, that's a different AEW project. Some look at this as the day AEW died or the day that the Revolution died, but I beg to differ. I think this was just the funeral. This was the culmination of a lot of things that were unfortunately going unsettled, like I mentioned before. I personally believe AEW died when Cody Rhodes debuted at WrestleMania 38 5 months earlier. Or maybe it died when he put out the post that he was leaving AEW in the first place. Or maybe it died when Cody Rhodes, in hindsight, gave up on AEW and started appearing less and less on on television. Cody Rhodes was the guy that kept things together. He was the bridge between Punk and the Elite. Cody was the guy trying to establish an identity for AEW so that it could remain sustainable. Again, I don't think it's a coincidence that all of this started after Cody's Mania debut. I, like many other people, didn't see this as a big deal at the time. Backstage fights happen all the time. Hell, even Tony Khan 3 years ago said backstage fights were no big deal. If you're thinking it's different because the EVPs were involved, I would tell you look at Vince McMahon. Now, Vince McMahon isn't a compass for good leadership whatsoever, but he is a prime example of physical altercations with the higher up being left in the past. I mean, the man literally got knocked out by Bret Hart and took it on the chin like a champ. The reason this was made such a big deal is the same reason Punk was going off in the first place. These guys cannot help themselves but to talk to the dirt sheets. And if you don't know what the dirt sheets is, the dirt sheets is like TMZ for wrestling. Except I think TMZ sort of kind of covers wrestling, but you know what I mean. I remember where I was and what I was doing when I got the news. I was watching a movie on the couch with my then girlfriend, and she got upset with me because I kept checking my phone. But literally every couple minutes, there was a new update and a new side of the story. I literally couldn't keep my attention on the movie that was on. And as we are relishing in all this drama, I know CM Punk is somewhere in Chicago looking at his imaginary reality TV camera like Jim Halpert. The thing that brought Punk to AEW was the perceived locker room camaraderie. A specific example that Punk even brought up was the lack of public knowledge of the condition of the late great John Huber, aka Brody Lee. Some of you may know him as Luke Harper of the Wyatt family. Got a lump in my throat on that one. Jesus Christ. Don't know what happened between then and now, but this was obviously a different company. And whether you believe the revolution died on this night or it was just a funeral, Punk gave the eulogy. And with that, here we are back at square one. Punk's future in wrestling is a big question mark. The revolution is dead, and AEW still doesn't have an identity. You would like to believe that the funeral will begin the process of rebuilding, but it was just a gift that just kept on giving, especially the content creators like me, because we was far from over. This is America. Like, I like to believe that's how they had to carry out CM Punk. He was just being handcuffed with his pants around his ankles. This is America. This is America. What is this, communist country?
Is it for what? Arresting me for what? I'm not allowed to stand up for myself? I thought this was America. Huh? Isn't this America? I'm sorry, I thought this was America.
So at the Brawl Out, Tony Khan would announce that the Trios champions, the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, have all been suspended and stripped of their championships. Tony would then announce that World Championship was also vacated, but would weirdly not name CM Punk. This would go on to be a theme going forward for AEW as they would proceed to give him the WWE treatment, for lack of a better word, by acting as if he never existed. Going as far as to place furniture over pictures of him backstage so his face couldn't be seen on television, removing him from promotional material, and even removing him as the head of the video game cover and replacing him with all people, Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega, who was also suspended. This would only add to the confusion because if what he did warrants him to be suspended, why was he being rewarded with the head of the video game cover? Now, to be fair, I guess he was the head of development for the video game. But again, why was he suspended if he was somebody who was known to try to keep the peace that night? I don't know. But in hindsight, this is most likely because the future of Punk was unknown. Many critics were calling for his job, but for all we know, that would be unnecessary as the press scrum was really his unofficial exit interview. According to Punk, he had no contact with anyone from AEW till 6 months later in March, going as far as to say he just assumed he was fired. With them removing all semblance of Punk and AEW, not even mentioning his name, and according to Punk, not even helping him find a surgeon or a physical therapist for his torn triceps injury, the writing was on the wall basically. Over time, the drama would settle down from what we could tell, but in reality, a civil war just turned into a cold war. It was a locker room divided from the Elite's friends, who were most of the employees, such as the Young Bucks' wife, who was in charge of merchandise, Excalibur, who was head of commentary, a friend of theirs who was traveling coordinator, More on him later, by the way. And some of the rosters, such as Jack Perry. More on him, by the way. Colt Cabana, who will have a match on Dynamite, seemingly just to throw a shot at CM Punk with Chris Jericho. Brandon Cutler, who will go on in the coming months to take jabs at Punk on Twitter. Also divided in this was some of Cody's trainees that he brought in, such as QT Marshall, who left AEW. Jade Cargill left AEW and is now in WWE. Ricky Starks, who all wrestling fans hopes leave AEW. And of course, Punk's friends such as FTR, Darby Allin, also Jade Cargill and Tony Khan. Kind of. As the Cold War goes stagnant, both sides would take shots at each other, such as one of the Bucks mocking Punk for botching the buckshot lariat, Kenny mocking the bite, Punk making a joke about being a locker room cancer, but that made me more of a shot at Jericho. According to Punk, he would reach out to men fences, as it was apparent that he himself was not ready to let AEW go, but advised by the other side's legal team that no contact should be had with them. Punk would direct his attention towards Dave Meltzer, who had continued to talk about him daily while spreading negative rumors about Punk. Meltzer also put out a story that Punk gave AEW a legal notice about his match with Moxley, alleging that he refused to do it. Punk would defend himself in an Instagram story explaining the issue with Moxley, where John refused, allegedly, well, not really allegedly, because John Moxley would go on to basically confirm it, where John refused to lose the match to him, as I've stated previously, and ended off the post by saying that Dave is a stooge and Chris Jericho is a liar, which is basically a way of saying that Jericho is feeding the internet blogs private info. This would be a growing theme over Punk's rehabbing process, as every time Punk was coming close to having some progress with him returning to the company, some negative stories would come out. Punk would make it obvious that he was ready to come back to wrestling, but in hindsight, he didn't want to come back to AEW. Punk was ready to come back to WWE. On April 25th, 2023, Punk, while still under contract for AEW, would visit Monday Night Raw in Chicago, and needless to say, this was a huge deal, as this was the first time he was seen backstage at a WWE show since he walked out 9 years before. Not much came of this, but he would seem to make an attempt to mend fists with Triple H and The Miz, two people he had major heat with, speaking with both of them before being asked to leave by Vince McMahon over a phone call. Whether that was because of the contract issue or just plain disdain for Punk, we will never know, as it was rumored that Vince was against having Punk return to do the Fox show or just coming back to WWE at all. This whole debacle would of course cause people a lot of confusion. Some speculate this was a tactic to scare AEW into letting him back in, or just to get more money out of him, or maybe it was just to mess with him. In hindsight, it's 2020, but I think Punk knew for a long time that this is where he wanted to be. With it even being rumored that he pitched a match between him and, weirdly enough, close friends of the Young Bucks, Kevin Owens, who actually had a problem with Punk stemming back from their Ring of Honor days, which was 2004, 2003. I don't know. I wasn't even in school yet. According to Punk, president of WWE Nick Khan has been trying to get him back in WWE since before even Nick Khan was with the company. We're talking about before 2018. Punk would later admit that he had no desire in returning to AEW, as he didn't want to be there, and it was obvious that the Elite didn't want him there at all. Unfortunately for Punk though, Warner Bros. Discovery had already made a deal with Tony Khan and AEW to start a new show on Saturdays called AEW Collision. Tony Khan's big idea was to have a soft brand split similar to how WWE has SmackDown versus Raw. It was going to be Dynamite versus Collision, which is Now, personally, I grew up on SmackDown versus Raw, and shows with dedicated rosters will always be my preference. But when you have a roster split because there's a real life divide in your locker room, that's less than preferable. That's less than that's hustling backwards, to put it lightly. That's very much you're putting lipstick on a pig, basically. Punk would echo these sentiments, but Tony Khan, being Tony Khan, would not budge. Punk would ultimately oblige, as the show would basically be his to run and shaped in his vision, as AEW is basically meant to be from the jump. But, whatever. Punk thought this was the opportunity to help some people out. So here we are nearly a year later, and although nothing has been solved, ratings are declining, ticket sales are decreasing, and the locker room is growing more and more restless. Here we have a new show that will ultimately do nothing but somehow, some way, in true AEW fashion, make things just much worse. Sold some tickets to come see my downfall. It sold out in minutes. Saw friends in the front row. They'll leave when I'm finished. Then the lights, then my name's gone, 'cause the ones who gas you up only come around when the flame's on. And I gave you my life. Oh. fuck it. So, it was announced that Collision's first episode would be held in Chicago, which basically confirms that Punk is returning. But as tickets were not selling as well as they would 2 years ago due to just the killing of this man's brand and reputation, Tony Khan would go on to have to spoil that Punk was returning. And the most telling sign of how much his reputation has been dragged through the mud, when this was announced, it was given a weirdly mixed response. This wasn't like a Cena mixed response either. It was like the fans were in a civil war as well, as it seemed the people were booing only to do so to offset the people cheering. And as crazy as it sounds, it seems like it was the same thing vice versa. People were just cheering to offset the booing.
Will feature
CM Punk.
CM Punk.
The time would come for Collision's debut, and at the time, it was amazing. Punk would return and again prove that he is one of, if not the greatest on the mic. Ultimately, he did what he planned to do with Collision. He made the show feel like it was produced by an entirely different company. As Dynamite was less story, more action, Collision was more story, less action. The beginning of the show was amazing. Although signs of Tony Khan would come out during the show sometimes, for the most part, it was everything we hoped AEW would be from the beginning. Things would not be all smooth though, as Punk would randomly take shots at Hangman Adam Page on a post-show promo.
Today I went to a local supermarket and I figured out why they call him Hangman. It's because the pegs in the toy aisle are full of Hangman action figures because nobody wants to buy them.
Oh! You son of a bitch!
He's a peg warmer, unlike me, who moves merchandise and pops ratings and sells toys. Got everybody in AEW saying, I'm the heart, I'm the soul, I'm the spirit. Well, that's objective. What is a fact is the people who say that certainly aren't the chin of AEW, because the lights go out faster than what? GTS, go to sleep. I don't know what I'm trying to do. I got locked too. I told the House of Black no chops, and they chopped me, so I'm very mad.
Now, in defense of Punk, this was in Adam Page's hometown where he was being jeered and treated like a heel. So he decided to play that role and antagonize the hometown hero, but this was definitely a case of read the damn room, bro. Also, in defense of Punk, it was reported that he apologized to Adam via text message as he was sent away from the building Collision was being held in. It was never reported what Adam's response was to it. It was also reported that Punk denied being the reason that Adam was sent away, as Punk would make it a priority to send people away from the show who he had problems with or has been known in the past to cause problems. This would be beneficial for the show until one person, this one motherfucker, he was never supposed to be there. He slipped in the crack somehow. He slipped in the crack somehow, and he somehow got in there. If you have the luxury of not knowing who this guy is, Jack Perry is a now 27-year-old professional wrestler. Much like his friends, the Young Bucks, he was born in Los Angeles, California. At the time, most known for being one of the four pillars in AEW, and more importantly, being the son of the late, great Luke Perry. Jack had recently changed gimmicks, going from 5'10", 165-pound scrappy underdog to Nepo baby jerk, to put it frankly. The new gimmick seemed to be a reflection of who he was in real life, as reports have stated before. He's not the most kind person in real life, to say the least. According to reports, Jack was causing problems backstage at Collision as he was approaching a vacation and wanted to do something crazy to write himself off television. According to Punk and multiple reports, Perry wanted to break a rental car window. When he was told no, Jack apparently went off the handle. Perry would proceed to cuss out doctors, officials, and even on-screen personality and wrestling legend Tony Schiavone. The latter of the bunch would beg Punk to handle the situation with Perry. According to Punk, the conversation would be very cordial and a peaceful conversation where Punk would explain the consequences of doing such a stunt, such as injuries, creating a bad name for wrestlers with rental companies, which allegedly has happened in the past before, and the fact that Collision doesn't do TV like this. Punk would tell Perry calmly, if you want to do that shit, Do it on Wednesdays. Do it on the Buck Show. Perry would seemingly agree to that. And this would be the end of that little debacle for now. Then came AEW All Out 2023, literally the biggest wrestling event to date. AEW in such a short time will hold a pay-per-view in London, England's Wembley Stadium, drawing the largest crowd in wrestling history, which is just crazy to think about. Just this company with, it's such little time would fall from grace, but I'll get to that in a second. Now, the exact number of the attendance is unclear, ranging from 70,000 to 81,000, but either way, whether the haters would, no matter what the haters say, this is impressive, especially for a company only in its 4th year. Very impressive. Being such a highly anticipated event, this very well could have been AEW's last chance to turn over a new leaf, to leave the past behind them and start a new chapter. This seemed to be Punk's mindset for the weekend as well, and out of the ring, as in the ring he was facing his longtime rival Samoa Joe to put a cap on their feud that started again when I was like 3 or 4 years old in Ring of Honor. And outside the ring, Punk was making plans to bury that past, as according to reports, Punk had planned a meeting with Tony Khan and the Young Bucks to officially bury the hatchet. I've neglected to mention this, but although their relationship is in the mud now, these 3 people at one point were huge fans of each other. The Bucks, before AEW even began, saying they were practically begging Punk to join them in this endeavor.
Want CM Punk to join the Bullet Club.
Hell yeah. I'm only texting him all the time, bothering him too.
Man, anything that is good for business, I'm totally for. Yeah, I just want to come back to wrestling.
Yeah, me too.
And Punk mentioning multiple times that it was a dream match for him and Bryan Danielson to square off with the Young Bucks. And also, in hindsight, a very interesting Instagram photo of the trio when Punk first debuted in AEW. But despite the past fascination with each other and despite Punk's efforts, allegedly, the Bucks would cancel this meeting right before it was supposed to happen. This would end up just being the beginning of Punk's horrible weekend. When Punk arrived in London, the number given to him for transportation to the stadium would bounce back, leaving him basically stranded. And it just so happened that the person who gave Punk this number, the head of transportation, was also a fan and friend of the Bucks who would be critical of Punk on Twitter. Punk would later state that this was no big deal, but would say that it was very unprofessional to do what they did, and also basically a reflection of the company as a whole. Punk would then make his way to the subway to take the train, or as our friends from across the pond call it, the Tube. I don't get it. Why it's called the Tube? Is a tube, but like, where is that just slang for them? Y'all let me know. I know some of y'all be watching, so yeah, y'all give me hip. The Tube. That just sounds crazy. That just sounds a little crazy. Here at the Tube, he would ask fans for directions to get there and would even take pictures with them on the Tube. That's my last time saying the Tube, I promise. Punk didn't seem to mind and would later state that it was just like taking the train in his hometown of Chicago, where he takes the train there. Or the Tube. When Punk would arrive at the stadium, he would begin to prepare for his match with Joe, as it was the opener. While preparing for this, though, he would be watching the pre-show where the last match was wrapping up between the son of ECW legend Taz and one of my favorite wrestlers, Hook, and Jack Perry. That Jack Perry, the 5'6" Nepo baby, that guy. They were wrapping up a no DQ match, and in AEW, that basically means the performers would find new ways to trend on Twitter, which they would do this time, but not for any stunts, but for 6 words that would go on to become the most iconic phrase in AEW history. Perry and Hook would go on to do the car stunt at this event that everyone told them not to do, but before they do so, Perry would knock on the glass, look in the camera, and say,
Crushing real glass! Crushing the abdomen. Go cry me a river.
Then on that same exact window that he knocked on, take a suplex on top of the windshield. Punk, noticing this, would again, like he did last year with Adam Page, walk up to Tony Khan and ask him to handle that. I did this because that's what he did. Tony Khan will respond in the worst way possible, asking Punk, what do you want me to do? Punk will respond and tell Tony, just be the boss. Like, you gotta beg your boss to be the boss. It's just insane. Punk would then say, because if he handled it, Tony Khan would not like how he handled it. Prophetic words, as Punk said. So as you can guess, Punk would have to go on and handle it himself. As Punk's match was up next, he was in gorilla position where he would confront Jack Perry about doing internet shit. After a bit of conversation back and forth, Perry would tell Punk, and get this, Perry would tell Punk, if he didn't like it, do something about it. So Punk did something about it. After this was said, Punk would push Jack Perry to create some distance like Prime Chill Sonnen, then proceed to put Perry in a chokehold until security and Samoa Joe would break things up. While being held by security, Punk would turn his attention to Tony Khan. Punk would point his finger at Tony Khan, get in his face, and tell him, "This place is a joke, you're a clown, and I quit." And although Punk would say all this and walk away to his locker room, eventually they were able to calm him down and be convinced to go on with the match. According to Punk, he went through with the match for his longtime friend and opponent in the match, Samoa Joe. The referee, Paul Turner, the producer of the match, Jerry Lynn. I don't know these people, so don't feel bad if you don't know these people, but apparently they're legends in the game. And on top of all of that, he did it for the fans who, for let's be honest, they most likely were there to see CM Punk. Like, let's be honest here. Like, it's the hard truth, but let's be honest.
I went to Tony and I was just like,
which Tony, by the way?
Tony Khan.
Okay.
And I was like, please handle that. Like, please. And he was like, what do you want me to do? And I was like, I'm not telling you what to do. Just be the boss, please. Like, I'm tired of this shit. You know, like I told you this was a mistake. And I told you separate shows wasn't going to work. And now we're all here. And, you know, like, please handle it. Because if you don't, you're not going to like the way I handle it.
Did he handle it?
No.
So you did?
Yes.
What happened?
Jack came back from his match. I was the next match. I'm sitting there. I got people with me. I'm not going to say who they are, you know, because I got a lot of friends who work there, and I wish them all well, and I don't want them to be punished because they're friends with me. And I walk up to him, and I'm just like, Jack, why do you insist on doing this dumb internet shit, like, on TV? And he's just like, well, if you got a problem about it, do something about it. And I was just like, man, come on, man. You know, I would fucking kill you. Like, what are we doing, you know? And it just, you know, it's like Chael says, sometimes you just can't let you get close, you know? I thought I was doing a responsible thing, you know? I didn't punch anybody. I just choked somebody a little bit. Samoa Joe was there, told me to stop, and then I quit. I turned to Tony and I said, this place is a fucking joke, man. You're a clown, I quit.
At the time, news would break during Samoa Joe's entrance, and from a Punk's fan's perspective, there was a mix of emotions. I remember at first hoping it wasn't real, and then thinking it wasn't that big of a deal. Again, people in sports fight all the time. In particular, wrestling has fights all the time. Again, jealousy, anger, and dumb shit. The only problem was, again, how the fuck did this get out to the media? Not only did it get out to the media, it got out not even after the event. Punk and Joe would have the very first match of the night, and Punk couldn't even make his entrance before he was in the headlines. Some people would go on to say this ruined the night, as this would be all people would talk about from the event. I tend to disagree. I think it's all we talk about because there was nothing to talk about from the event, but then again, that's a different video for a different day. Punk and Joe would go on to have a great match. Most would say match of the night. And just a side note, if you could go back and watch Punk's entrance, he's like got a little smirk on his face. I think it's funny as hell. And now we know why he got a smirk on his face. He just cleared somebody and called his boss he just called his boss a little joke. He called him a clown. And now he's headlining that boss's show. Like, that is insane. Afterwards, Punk would learn that Perry was told to leave the building. Punk would asked if he had to leave as well and was told he was welcome to stay. However, after taking pictures with Joe and the people who worked on the match, like I said before, hanging out in the locker room and watching the show, a security guard would ask what Punk plans was for the night. And Punk, being a better guy than I am, would ask the security guard would it be easier for his job if he left, in which the security guard would say yeah. So Punk left the building and ordered Nando's. He made sure to shout out Nando's, I'm not sure why, at his hotel for some of his friends and former co-workers now, and enjoyed the rest of the night. Tony Khan would go on to do a post-media scrum where he would confirm that there was a physical altercation backstage, but refused to comment further. For me personally, this is where it started and where it ended. I didn't think it had to go further than this, nor did I think it would. By the end of the night, I was more upset about the MJF and Adam Cole main event than anything Punk had going on. Plus, this was like less than a week, or I think it was the same week Bray Wyatt had passed away. So a backstage fight was just like, do we really need to worry about that right now? Plus, Punk just got inducted in like a wrestler's Hall of Fame for helping guys out. Like it was just, Yeah, like it was the same week. The same week he gets in a fight backstage with another man-child. He's being inducted into a Hall of Fame. Damn, bro. It was just so much going on. It was just like, okay, this fight, let it go. Let it go. Even Samoa Joe would go on to say this was not that big of a deal, but it's not my company. This company isn't run and watched by people like me who don't care about a backstage fight. Someone had to be punished, and unfortunately, that someone was CM Punk. It would later be announced that Punk and Perry would be suspended, leading to them missing the All Out pay-per-view the next week in Punk's hometown of Chicago. This was not enough for a lot of fans and media personalities who would actually campaign for Punk to be fired, to which I had no belief it would actually happen until 5 days later on September 2nd, AEW and Tony Khan will release a statement announcing the official termination of CM Punk's contract. Yeah. It was like one of those things where it was like, they not going to actually do it, are they? It's not going to actually happen, is it? It didn't happen. It was just like, damn. These motherfuckers really dumb. This would come as a surprise, not only because AEW just released their biggest star, but they were released a statement 27 hours before a pay-per-view was going to be held in CM Punk's hometown. And even worse, 3 hours before Collision, the show that was made for CM Punk in his hometown. This would be looked at as the right move by media members in AEW, but nobody can disagree that this was done at the worst time possible. To this day, I still have no idea why they thought it was necessary to do it that night. Like, why did you have to make that announcement this weekend while in Chicago? But I have to give Tony Khan some credit. I'm not sure if it was on purpose or not, but he would do something that would actually be sort of a chess move. Tony, before the Collision show would actually go on air, address the crowd alone. Tony would be booed and shower with CM Punk chants. As his speech went on, though, he would go on tangents where his tone could easily be described as defensive and yet passionate. You could tell that he really did not want to fire Punk. Being such a fan of him, I'm sure it hurt him. Remember, this company was built on a prospect of Punk joining it from the jump. It was even reported that when Punk returned for the first episode of Collision, Tony Khan would start his own CM Punk chant backstage. Tony would surprisingly get the crowd on his side for the most part when he stood up from the chair he brought on the stage and stated that it was unacceptable for people to be put in danger backstage. Tony would state that he loved Chicago and this was the last place he would want to make this announcement, but it's what he felt like he had to do. Again, I still don't know why he felt like he had to do it, but the deed was done. The crowd was mixed with some booing and others cheering.
Welcome home for me.
Why did he even come out here? This was never going to end well, bro. Bro, go back. What are you doing out here? Why are you sitting down? What are you doing?
I have never done this before. I wanted to come out and talk to you before the show starts. Usually when I come out here in Chicago, in front of friends and family.
This is never going to end well for you.
I always talk about how I'm from this great state. I'm from the great state of Illinois myself. I grew up here.
Why did he do
this? In Champaign.
Why did he do this?
To come here to this
This
building
is never
was
going to
pretty much
end
the biggest deal in the world to me. Until I was 28 years old, I had never spent more than 2.5 weeks in a row out of Illinois in my entire life. And I love it here very much. I love bringing pro wrestling here.
I don't know why he thought this was a good idea.
5 years ago, I came. It wasn't actually in the city, as many of you remember. 5 years ago, it was out in Hoffman Estates near the streets of Woodfield. I went to the original All In. That was the biggest independent wrestling show of all time. 5 years later, last weekend, we had AEW All In. That was the biggest pro wrestling show of all time, period.
He said, period.
We sold more tickets to that show than any wrestling show in the history of the wrestling business. And now, it's very important to me to keep the tradition of All Out alive. All Out started, to be honest with you, because when I started AEW, Ring of Honor had paid for the original All In, and I couldn't call it All In without possibly getting sued by Ring of Honor, which I now own. I came here to talk to you from the bottom of my heart because today I had to do one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, and sitting here right now is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do.
We forgive you, Tony. Or at least I do.
I didn't get it. At this point, what I'm going to say,
what did he do? Why is he out here?
I'm
so confused. Oh, what?
And All Out this weekend because I really respect all of you. I'm a wrestling fan like you, and if I were in your shoes, I could totally understand.
I have a CM Punk shirt on, but I get it.
But I just want to tell you, I'm out here because I had to do something I did not want to do today.
What are you talking about?
I'm very sorry to fans or anybody who's upset by it.
Hey, I believe it.
This week we
I know you didn't want to do it.
Independent of me, I have a discipline committee in AEW that is independent, and it's comprised the majority of lawyers.
Such a work, bro.
And I also brought in outside legal counsel. I hired independent lawyers to investigate this and make a recommendation. This was different than anything I've ever been involved in sports or wrestling. It was very tough. When I met them, the unanimous recommendation was the action that I took. The action that I took came.
Imagine this is your first time hearing about this. Oh, yeah, right?
But I have to say, it stems from an
Wait, what is he talking about?
Last weekend at AEW All in London. I've been going to wrestling shows like you for over 30 years, and the first one I ever went to was with my dad, who's here tonight, downstate in Champaign, Illinois. And thank you, Dad, because without him, none of this would be possible, because he took a huge leap on a dream that became AEW.
Thank you, Dad.
And that's why we're here. And everything I know about business, I learned from him. He's a family businessman. This is a family business. And I care about the people who work here. That's the production staff, that's everybody that works here. The wrestlers, but also people you don't think about every day that make this show happen. I've been going to wrestling shows for over 30 years as a fan, and I've been producing them on TNT here for almost 4 years now. And this was the first time, this incident, that I have ever feared for my safety in a wrestling show, that I have ever feared for my life in a wrestling show.
Okay. All right, bro. Don't do it.
Of the people who work backstage.
I'm sure he probably did.
I'm sorry, but they don't come here. They don't work here to be put in danger. The people who work on the
what are you doing?
should not come to work and worry about, am I going to get hurt?
I'm going to Brawl Out tomorrow.
There shouldn't be 50-year-old people with artificial joints worried, am I going to get hurt for coming to work?
You're right, Tony. Now say fuck CM Punk.
I'm sorry, I can't have that. And I won't have that. And that's why I made a very tough choice. There's no place in the world. This is literally the last place in the world, literally the United Center, that I would want to tell you this. But, no. And if you want to, look. First and
don't
foremost,
start rambling, bro.
The recommendation was from the committee, but the decision...
The committee? This is guilty conscience talking right now.
But I want you to know...
This is guilty conscience talking. This is so awkward.
Because you love professional wrestling. This company is a lovely professional wrestling. And I know there's wrestlers here that every single one of you care about. They're all going to work very hard to put on a great episode of Collision for you here tonight. They're going to work very hard,
props to you, Tony,
to put a great All Out on for you, because we've been doing All Out here for years, and I want to keep it in Chicago forever. It means a lot. I love this town, I love this state, I love so many people here, including my family and so many of you. I love pro wrestling, I love doing this every week. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm sorry if I disappointed you. Never my intent, but I did what I had to do.
Apologizing. Stop incriminating yourself.
Thank you for being here.
What the crowd would not see was the announcement of CM Punk's termination on live television. Here, Tony Khan would make the bold claim that CM Punk incident made him fear for his life. Tony Khan would not say this when he addressed the crowd, as I think we all know this would be complete and utter nonsense. Lawyer speak, I believe some people would say it is. Tony Khan would again use the backstage employees to say that he feared for their safety as well, and would reiterate that he's been going to wrestling shows for decades and it was the first time he feared for his life. This statement would not go over well with the internet wrestling community, and to this day, a year later, Tony Khan is still being mocked for this announcement. This would not be the last mistake on this night, as one of the Young Bucks was seen taking a literal victory lap around the ring as Collision crowd was clearing out, which would end up being very poetic as it was a sign of things to come. They got what they wanted. Punk was gone and they got the company back to themselves. AEW was their company again. But what came with that was the half-empty arenas. You can celebrate, you can do your style, you can take your victory laps, but it's going to be in a half-empty arena, if that. This was the first time I felt like I wasn't crazy, and that's because it took this event for me to realize that AEW and their fans are in a bubble. The best way to put them is they're basically the vocal minority. The feeling at this time was one of disappointment, but weirdly also relief. Speaking for me personally, as a CM Punk fan, I was highly disappointed. I remember Punk debuting in AEW and the heights he took them to, from the MJF feud to the tag team match with Sting. He gave us many great moments in entertaining wrestling television that we missed out on for 7.5 years. But as a fan of Phil Brooks, the man, I was relieved it was finally over. It was obvious from me, the debut episode of Collision, that Punk was done with AEW. So I was happy that he got out of there, but it was scary. It was scary to think that I may never see CM Punk in a wrestling ring again. TNA couldn't afford him. The AEW bridge was burned. NWA had a lot of BS going on, let alone affording him was way out of the picture. The only real option for Punk to return to the ring was WWE. And there's no way that happens, right? Right? Now, I'm not excusing anything Punk did, but I will say it's something about sweets that just make you want to just let everything loose. You feel me? I'll just say they're lucky he didn't have ice cream, because this shit is amazing. Way better than seltzer water or whatever y'all drink. This point in my life was one of the lowest, but also one of the best times of my life while being a wrestling fan. On one hand, one of my favorite wrestlers had just been fired, and my other favorite had just passed away, all in about a 10-day span. On the other hand, this gave me so much inspiration to bitch and complain on the internet, thus eventually giving me the platform on YouTube I have at the moment. When Bray Wyatt passed away, I made my first video in months as I was inspired to leave a legacy. Bray Wyatt inspired me in ways that will make him live forever, as so much of his creativity is shown through in such a short amount of time, as people will always be able to look back on his creations and notice new small details, or at the very least look at what he created and be inspired to create something of their own. And that led me to shaping my own platform. Fortunately, the thing my audience wanted though was a 3-month scavenger hunt for clues what Punk's next wrestling move would be. Looking back on it, I spent way too much time dissecting commentary and storylines in WWE. CM Punk would not help this obsession whatsoever, as he would throw subtle hints of what his plans were, such as his first appearance since being fired from AEW. Punk would be doing his side gig as a commentator for CFFC, a MMA organization with ties to UFC, which is now business partners with WWE. During these appearances, Punk and his co-commentators would make jokes such as Punk saying he was free for the next 2 months. To put this into context, in 2 months, WWE will be holding their Survivor Series pay-per-view in Punk's hometown of Chicago. There would be even teasers such as Punk's colleagues would be wearing a WWE Championship hanky in his little blazer. And also in the same night, Punk and friends would take a shot at Tony Khan in the Collision show by saying someone should let Punker book a show. Time will go on. WWE will have a few teases as well, such as having multiple wrestlers claim to be the best in the world, which was CM Punk's whole gimmick thing. It's on the back of his most famous shirt. Shinsuke Nakamura hitting the GTS, which is CM Punk's finisher move. Corey Graves, former friend of Punk, using a line from one of Punk's most infamous promos. I believe the line is the devil's greatest trick was convincing you people he didn't exist. Apparently that's from a movie though. So maybe I should take that chef's kiss away. To this day, we still don't know if these things were hinting towards Punk. It was a lot, and what came with that was a lot of gaslighting from skeptics, media members, and fans. Now, I'm not sure if those fans are Punk haters or just doubters like me who didn't want to get their hopes up like they have been for 9 years. But either way, it was a very stressful, yet fun time to be a wrestling fan. All I knew was that if Punk didn't return at Survivor Series, he wasn't returning at all. To let you know what I was thinking about at that time, that entire month I was planning on going to Chicago for the event, but when that weekend came, I was so unsure if Punk was coming, I decided to stay home. I wish I could make everyone remember how bad the WWE and Punk relationship was. And even though they may be under new management, the face of the new era is Triple H, who may have had a worse relationship with Punk than Vince did. Now, I know that sounds crazy right now, but on some wrestling shit, Punk should have been the one to retire Triple H, because I don't think John Cena is Punk's greatest rival. I don't think it's Randy Orton. I don't think it's Samoa Joe. I think it's Triple H. Real life. And if kayfabe is dead and we're bringing backstage nonsense into real life, into the show, yeah, Triple H is his biggest op. But no matter what, the day was here and it was either going to happen tonight or never. I even went a step further in saying it was either going to happen at the beginning of the show or not at all. And given the fact that Randy Orton was also supposed to return on this night, which was spoiled for us by the WWE because they didn't want the anticipation of Randy Orton being mixed up with Punk and getting the crowd's hopes up, and it didn't happen. Randy was scheduled to return during the main event where he joined the match at the end, not having to do too much due to this being his first appearance in like over a year and a half due to a career-threatening back injury. And everything went as planned. Randy returned to a thunderous ovation, did some body slams, did some hanging DDTs, and an epic RKO to win a match. This was great. One of the greatest, if not the greatest, wrestling legends is back in wrestling and is full-time, and that's amazing. But I can't lie and say that I wasn't disappointed that Punk wasn't coming back. You got to feel bad for Randy on this night as well because, again, Randy Orton is one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time, and one of the most influential wrestlers of all time. And people just like, yeah, that's great. And yeah, this is nice. But we were kind of hoping for Punk. So, yeah, like it was amazing to have Randy Orton back for the first time in a year and a half. But damn, I really wanted Punk, and it kind of settled in like, yeah, I mean, what were we expecting? You know, did you really expect Randy Orton to allow somebody to overshine his return, his grand return that we've been waiting on for a year and a half? And like, did you really expect that? Did you really expect all this bad blood between Triple H and CM Punk to just be thrown to the wayside and CM Punk just trashing his company for the last 10 years? Did you really expect that? So it's like, yeah, he's never coming back to the company, but damn, like, most likely we'll never see CM Punk in a ring again.
No way! What the fuck?
Oh my god! Oh my god! This is happening!
Do you think there's ever a chance we'll see you back in a squared circle?
No.
Never?
No.
Wow.
Never, ever. Never, ever, ever.
Yeah, it happened. The company and the wrestler most synonymous with working the crowd and playing with their emotions did the unthinkable. This was Kobe and LeBron joining the same team. This was the sequel to the movie you really wanted but would never get. This was Spider-Man 4 with Tobey Maguire. In a world where companies seem to hate acts of fan service, They did it. To put things into perspective again, I was 13 years old when Punk quit the WWE. I remember being in my last class of the day when I read the Bleacher Report article, and even then I was in disbelief. I thought it was a part of a storyline, but no. That day would begin the decade-long game of Clue that exhausted us to like no extent. Like there was again, like I can't put you in that mode of feeling like something can happen, but it's just it never did, to the point where it's never going to happen. It's just never going to happen. When he returned, I was 23 years old. That is 9 years. That is almost 10 years. 2 months away from being 10 years to the day that this man returned. Like, all the thing that happened in my life. I graduated from high school. I dropped out of 2 different colleges. I'm a homeowner at this point. But the wait was worth it. To this day, I still can't believe I see Punk on Mondays, Tuesdays, and sometimes Fridays with a full crowd. And on top of that, it was great to see Punk somewhere where he was appreciated. I know it was in Chicago, but Punk had the crowd in the palm of his hand that night, including this guy. I wonder how it feels to be known as the CM Punk Chicago guy. Like, your life is made at that point. Like, let me have been that guy. Like, that is incredible. That guy's amazing. The love was universal. Punk's return broke the internet with not a negative tweet in sight. Fans loved it. Media members were in disbelief. And who could blame them? There was literally no confirmation or conversations until the week of the pay-per-view. The event was on Saturday. Punk and Triple H would not speak until that day on Thanksgiving 2 days before.
I always call him Triple H or Hunter. That's what it is. And then when I spoke to him, that's when the ball really got rolling, because it was a very I asked him if he wanted to talk on the phone, and he said, no, I would actually rather I would like to FaceTime you so I can see you. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, and we just talked about a whole lot of stuff, and about, stuff that was at one point serious to probably both of us that is like silly now. And we just kind of laughed, buried a hatchet. And then we started talking business. And I was like, man, this is like Thanksgiving. I don't want to bother you. You're with your girls. Like, we can talk about it later. But then I was just like, oh, well, Friday, and then the show's Saturday. It all got done very, very fast. My lawyer was not stoked to be working OT on Thanksgiving.
Where apparently they buried the decade-long hatchet leading to Punk coming into the arena mid-show and signing his contract before going out like he would 12 years ago at Money in the Bank 2011.
I'm driving to the building, and I don't have a deal yet. And I call my lawyer and I go, I'm gonna drive to the building just in case. Okay. Just keep working on it.
That's nuts.
Oh, it's insane.
That's nuts.
It's insane.
How long's that drive from the crib to the
case? I mean, depending on traffic, but at that time of year, no construction, so I think I got there pretty quick. 20 minutes maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. Man, I'm stressed out leaving the house. You know what I mean? My wife's like, I'm so excited for you. She's like, just put this white T-shirt on.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I was probably wearing this. I don't know. Get to the building. Security comes out, hands me blacks, sweatpants, hoodie. And he goes, sit in your car.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all right. So here, hoodie up. And the truck next to me, because we have pictures of superstars on all the 18-wheelers and the TV trucks and stuff like that. And I'm parked right next to the TV truck. And it's just Steve Austin's head looking at me the whole time. So I'm just like, take a picture, sent it to Steve. You know what I mean? He hit me back with a WTF, kid.
First of all, that's amazing. That's sick. Come on.
Yeah. Oh my God. And I just sit there, I'm literally just like sitting
by yourself in the car.
By myself in the car. I'm listening to the Clash and the Ramones. I'm trying to center myself.
Yeah.
Trying to think about, like 8-year-old me.
In through the nose, out through the mouth.
Like this is just, just literally trying to be in the moment. if this happens, because it still wasn't a guarantee. Like, if this happens.
There was no contract. Punk didn't even know if it was going to happen. And I'll play the interview, but Punk thought maybe he should just turn around and go home.
Was there ever a chance, though, really, that you might be like, nah, I'm peeling out and leaving?
Me, personally, I mean, there could have been if there was like some hard nose to some things in the, the contracts. But again, I think both sides were eager.
They wanted it.
You know what I mean? But then you get the lawyers involved, and then it's a lot. It's a lot. But I get a text, and it's just like, okay, we're gonna clear the hallway, and we're gonna come get you, and we're just gonna put you in Triple H's office. I'm like, okay. So I run through the building. So like, maybe
hoodie on and got you wrapped up like Michael Jackson's son.
Yep. They put me in the freight elevator, and it's funny because I know the building like the back of my hand. I'm like, the stairs are right around the corner. I could just walk down the stairs. They put me in the freight elevator. Freight elevator lowers. I hear him on the other side of the elevator. They're screaming and yelling, "Clear the hallway! Clear the hallway!" And I'm like, "Oh no!" I'm that guy now. All the boys are going to be like, this is still, why do we have to, but they clear the hallway and the freight elevator door opens up, and hit like 6 steps this way is the door I'm walking into. And I walk in there and I just sit down, and then I'm just in there, and they're starting the War Games match. Right. So it's literally like, I don't have a deal yet,
We're at the end of the show.
Yeah. So I'm just sitting in there, and the lawyers are going back and forth, hammering stuff out. And Triple H walks in, and he's just like, if this gets done, we're just going to wait. When the time's right, we're going to bring you in through Gorilla. And I was like, okay, great. So contracts get executed, and it's time. And it's literally just like, okay, deep breath, open the door, walk through Gorilla. And now it's like, there's so many people in Gorilla.
Yeah. Can I ask you, who was the first person you saw? Like, do you remember the first person you made eye contact with, and they were like, what the?
Yeah, right. Because I got brought into Gorilla, and I don't think people knew. I think people were just piled in there because it's the end of the show, and there's social media people who are going to be filming, winners and losers coming through the curtain, and they're doing their job and stuff like that. And I remember being in a Gorilla, and then all of a sudden I get bear hugged from behind. And like, as I kind of turn around to see who it is, it's Bailey.
Standard Bailey.
And she's like, I knew it. She's like, as soon as they started yelling at us to clear the hallway, she's like, I knew it. Yeah. And she's not letting go of me. And then the Triple H is there,
It's like, Bailey, let him go.
No. Stephanie. I remember seeing and having a moment with, there's somebody I haven't seen in 10 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's somebody that, people are like, oh, they hate each other. Regal, I remember looking at Regal, and Regal going,
damn, look at us. Like that Paul Rudd video. Look at us. Hey, look at us. Look at us.
100%. But there was just so many people in there. It was like, and then I don't know what to do. I absolutely lose my composure.
Yeah.
Because all I know is I'm coming out.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the set looks like. I don't know if there's a ramp. I'm literally like in the dark,
walking in blind.
And so I'm trying to talk to Triple H over the table, and it's so loud, and there's so many people, and they like hit my music, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah. What am I doing?
Look cool.
And he's like, go out and walk down to the cage. And I'm like, go out and walk all the way down to the cage.
That's crazy.
And he was trying to tell me that there was 2 cages for the baby faces and the heels for the War Games. Yeah. And he wanted me to walk down and stand in between there. And in my head, I'm like, I'm marching all the way to the cage.
Yeah, right.
And he's like, no, my music's playing. Yeah. And like, we're going back and forth. And I'm like, we're both freaking out. We're like, no. And like, he rips his headset off, and I'm like, oh God, what are we doing? And we figured it out, but
that's amazing. I'll never look at that the same way.
Yeah, the chaos backstage, brother. I mean, it's the last minute.
Someone's got to have this on film too.
There was so much stuff going on back there, and they film everything now. So I'm sure someday we're going to see a lot of cool stuff.
Your next.
It was just such a great moment, and I love that chaos and that uncertainty again. I was like, man, I could just drink it up all day. But when the music hit, it was deafening.
Yeah,
I was like, oh man.
And according to Punk, all the hints on WWE television. That had him questioning himself. Like, he was wondering if he should be tanning and getting in the gym or not. According to Punk, it was so close to Survivor Series and it was so close to not happening that Nick Khan, president of WWE, would say, let's just aim for Royal Rumble 2 months later. But Punk, like me, knew it had to be that night and it had to be that city. He didn't want to give up leverage. He knew it had to be that night. Not only would this man return to the company he vowed to never show up to again, but he overshadowed Randy Orton. Like, I cannot, even if you aren't a wrestling fan, you know who Randy Orton is. Randy Orton is one of the most popular celebrities, athletes, wrestlers in the world. And CM Punk overshadowed him. This is somebody, in all due respect to Randy Orton, but Randy Orton was given the keys from day one. Punk had to leave to earn that stardom. This really shows the growth in not only CM Punk, but really in Randy Orton, because Randy Orton 12 to 13 years ago was not be going for that shit. Randy Orton 12 to 13 years ago, nah. But this is a grown Randy Orton. This is a grown CM Punk. Like, they would even have a meeting and watch one of the best WrestleMania matches ever. They would watch it together and just show, like, just see the growth in these two guys. It's just, again, I was watching these guys when I was 10, 11, hell, 7, 8 years old. And now I'm 23, 24. And just seeing these guys be the old heads now is just amazing to me. Again, 12 to 13 years ago, Randy Orton wouldn't allow CM Punk to overshadow his moment like that. And not only that, WWE wouldn't have allowed it. But Punk did that. Punk did it. Punk did it, and Punk and Randy Orton even shared a moment across the arena. Punk, for the first time, other than the videos and pictures I've seen of him with his wife and dog Larry, looked like he was at peace. This was the first time in my life I saw Punk look like he had his guard down in the wrestling environment. Punk, from the beginning of his career, was always chasing something. He always had a chip on his shoulder, for better or for worse. Even in AEW, in hindsight, from the beginning, from the jump, Punk did not look like someone who was happy to be there. He looked like somebody who was motivated to prove himself to someone. Who that someone is, I'm not sure. But this reflected in his first promo where, in the beginning, he took shots at WWE. Punk wouldn't mention AEW or take shots at them for months, which would weirdly upset fans who thought WWE was taming him, which would just go on to prove that there was nothing Punk could do to make everyone happy. But what would really matter was that he was happy. Unfortunately for Punk, as you guys know by now, the good times would come to a sudden halt when, in his first televised match, Punk would suffer the same exact injury he suffered in AEW on the other arm. And I was there in terrible seats and I could barely see anything that night, but I did see that. That is the one thing I saw. I seen him favoring his arm as soon as he took the move. I thought it was a weird thing to grab your arm on a DDT, and I knew something was wrong. Just like with the foot injury, just like with the triceps injury. I just know it. I just know my guy. Punk would go on to finish the match, giving me a little hope he wasn't too hurt, but Punk not posting on Instagram, fan pics with him holding his arm awkwardly, and 2 days later, WWE would make the announcement that Punk would be opening the show with an announcement. So I kind of already knew what it was. And then later on that show, he would announce on Monday Night Raw that he indeed tore his tricep, which would mean he would miss WrestleMania, where he would most likely accomplish his goal of main eventing WrestleMania for the first time in his career. Unfortunately, he would have to wait for that. But what wouldn't wait is the beginning of the feud of the year, where Drew McIntyre, who was eliminated by Punk in the Royal Rumble, would attack Punk, starting a feud, which would give Punk a role as special guest commentator for Drew's match versus Seth Rollins, which ironically was the match that was scheduled for Punk. Punk would attack Drew after he won the World Heavyweight Championship, causing him to lose the title 5 minutes later to Damian Priest when he cashed in the Money in the Bank, which ironically Punk is most famous for. Like, when you think about the Money in the Bank, you think about Punk. So it was real, like, poetic. This was another amazing moment, proving Punk as a valuable asset to any company, whether he's wrestling or not. This would not be the end of Punk's night, as he would come out during the main event to celebrate with Cody Rhodes in his crowning moment, which was, again, a very poetic moment, as these two were guys who 3 years ago were hugging an AEW ring, going through hell and back just to be at the top of the mountain where we never thought we'd see them again, who, again, were really like if there's no Cody Rhodes and if there's no CM Punk, if WWE treats these guys like they're being treated right now, there is no AEW. There is no Tony Khan in wrestling business. There is no Young Bucks on A&E or whatever, not A&E, TNT. There is no Young Bucks on TNT. There is no Kenny Omega on the big stage. Like, CM Punk and Cody Rhodes are the catalyst for AEW even existing whatsoever. And here they are hugging and kissing on the biggest stage in WWE history, WrestleMania 40. The irony of it is just you can't write stories this ironic. This capped off a beautiful weekend for Punk, which started with him celebrating the man who gave him the tools to be here in the first place, Paul Heyman, as he was taking his rightful place in the WWE Hall of Fame. Punk would sit front row right next to his best friend's kids. None of this would have seemed possible without the drama that Punk and AEW went through, and everyone was just happy it was over. Punk had all these legendary moments and reunions that were decades in the making. AEW was getting more ridiculous than ever, doing everything they wanted to, more than ever. Drinking blood, jumping from ladders on the glass, stapling each other with staple guns, bad comedy skits, and something about a devil, which I'm not too proud to admit I was a fan of at first. But no matter what you thought about the television, the quality of television will always be reflected in the numbers, whether that's ticket sales, ratings, merch, and AEW's numbers were plummeting. Ratings-wise, merch-wise, ticket sales-wise, every metric. Whether that was because Punk leaving, Cody leaving, injuries to stars, or just bad television, things were getting dire for AEW, and at the worst time possible as well, as AEW was approaching their final year of their media rights deal with Warner Bros. Discovery. And in business, it's unfortunately a what have you done for me lately type of environment. So AEW was desperate, and we all know desperate times calls for desperate measures. And AEW would do something no other wrestling company would be able to do for a very long time. They would overshadow WWE during WrestleMania weekend. After night one of WrestleMania weekend, AEW would announce they would be releasing footage of the incident at All In between CM Punk and Jack Perry. I'll admit, as a Punk fan, I was worried. I thought for the first time Punk would be exposed as a liar. There was no way AEW would air this footage if they didn't think it would expose Punk as a fraud. Many believe this was a response to Punk's interview with Ariel Helwani the Monday before WrestleMania weekend. Either way, people were hyped. Although it was reported that talent was not as enthused about the segment, regardless of how people felt, it was really happening. Some people thought it was going to be a bait and switch, as the outcome could not be anything positive for AEW in the long run. Best case scenario, they show Punk as a hothead liar who deserved to be fired. In worst case, they show Punk was telling the truth and everyone in AEW is soft for blowing this out of proportion. Either way, none of that affects AEW in a positive way. This segment does nothing but draw attention to someone who is no longer in the company, and also proves that they need him more than they're willing to admit. I'm not happy to admit how much I was looking forward to this episode. It very much dominated my Wednesday. Right before the show started, it was speculated that Punk and his lawyer may be looking to sue AEW for showing this footage, as said lawyer posted a law in London stating that you can't show private footage of an individual without their consent. It was really messy and nothing has come of it since, but I thought I should add that to this. I don't know, it was kind of weird. It was a lot of pre-show hype to this nonsense. It was reported that Punk was not shook about the plans to air the footage, but I, as a fan of his, could not shake this feeling that AEW would not be this dumb. So it was finally time. And the segment started with the Young Bucks explaining their intentions as to why they're showing the footage. The Bucks were continuing their feud with the current tag team champions and best friends of CM Punk, FTR. This would be the first time these two teams have squared off since the same event where Punk crashed out and quit, All In 2023. The Bucks would say as EVPs, the fight backstage took their minds off the match, which led to them losing. Some wrestling kayfabe nonsense, but it was kind of slick, I must admit. Before showing the footage though, they would take shots at Punk never naming him, but saying he tried to make All In about himself and bringing up the most ironic thing Punk has ever said, which AEW fans will never let him live down. When Punk first arrived in AEW, he gave a lot of praise to Jack Perry, saying that if anyone has a problem with Jack, then they're the problem. Punk would also then say he's going to kick his ass one day as well.
Someday I'm gonna kick your ass.
But people seem to leave that one out for some reason. The Bucks would try to justify showing the footage by accusing FTR of having Punk start problems to distract the EVPs. One of the Bucks would interrupt him, saying you can't accuse people of, like on a public platform, of conspiracies with no evidence, mocking Punk for his assumptions on the Young Bucks, which again was another slick shot. But again, we can't ignore all the evidence. Again, like, come on, Meltzer driver, come on. The Bucks would then proceed to show the footage, and it was bad, man. Like, it was bad. I wish I could watch the footage for the first time again, man. If you were an AEW fan, it was literally everything Punk said it was. He walked up to Jack. They had words. Punk pushed him, then put him in a chokehold. Samoa Joe and security broke it up. Punk, while being grabbed by security, has a free arm where he points at Tony Khan and visibly yells at him, breaks away from security where he then walks off. This is everything. I just summed it up for you. It's about a minute long footage, and I just summed it up for you in 15 seconds.
I went to Tony, and I was just like...
Which Tony, by the way?
Tony Khan.
Okay.
And I was like, please handle that. Like, please. And he was like, what do you want me to do? And I was like, I'm not telling you what to do. Just be the boss, please. Like, I'm tired of this shit. You know? Like, I told you this was a mistake. I told you separate shows wasn't going to work, and now we're all here, and, you know, like, please handle it. Because if you don't, you're not going to like the way I handle it.
Did he handle it?
No. No.
So you did?
Yes.
What happened?
Jack came back from his match. I was the next match. I'm sitting there. And I got people with me. I'm not going to say who they are, you know, because I got a lot of friends who work there, and I wish them all well, and I don't want them to be punished because they're friends with me, you know. And I walk up to him, and I'm just like, Jack, why do you insist on doing this dumb internet shit, like on TV, you know? And he's just like, well, if you got a problem about it, do something about it. And I was just like, man, come on, man. You know, I'll fucking kill you. Like, what are we doing, you know? And it just, you know, it's like Chael says, sometimes you just can't let you get close, you know? I thought I was doing a responsible thing, you know? I didn't punch anybody. I just choked somebody a little bit. Samoa Joe was there, told me to stop, and then I quit. I turned to Tony and I said, this place is a fucking joke, man. You're a clown. I quit.
Yeah, it was a nothing burger. Nothing we all haven't seen before. But you can't fight your coworkers, even though it's not just regular coworkers. Like, we're not in a fucking office. We're athletes. But hey, again, it was everything Punk said it was. Yes, it does look like he threw a punch, but it didn't connect. And you can loosely say he lunged at Tony Khan. But if you're in fear for your life by someone who's being held back by security, points at you and calls you a clown, I can't feel bad for you. This was disasters for AEW. They were being clowned relentlessly on social media. People left watching the show to join the fun of discussing this blunder, and the rest of the show was irrelevant. It helped the ratings for the time being, but it did not keep the audience. You can even make the argument it hurt the audience, as they haven't drawn this high ratings since. And to this day, they haven't even come close to it. Some people say this is where AEW jumped the shark, and I tend to disagree, but again, that's a different video for a different day. This night on social media was one of the funniest to be a Punk fan, as he even joined the fun, posting this hilarious meme of George Bush saying mission accomplished. And y'all can let me know, is that real or is that Photoshop? I don't know. I was alive, but come on, bro. I was in diapers. Ariel Wani would jump in and throw gas on the fire as he synced up the audio from his show where Punk would describe exactly what happened. He synced that up to the surveillance footage, and again, it's exactly everything Punk said it was. This is when people would notice that AEW were handing out copyright notices to people who were reposting the footage. Even to this day, I'm not sure if on my video, I can have this video contain the footage because AEW be striking shit down like a fucking umpire. Like, I don't know. I would love to, but I'll leave a link in the description if so. This proves that AEW immediately knew this whole thing just backfired. The Young Bucks as well, going as far as to throw the owner of the company and their supposed friend under the bus by claiming they were against airing the footage, which is absolutely fucking ridiculous. These are the same dudes who are EVPs, refuse to have a meeting with Punk, only wrestle their style of matches, and only work with their referee, got all of their friends hired. You expect me to believe that these guys who have creative control of what they don't and do want to do did something that they didn't want to do? Fuck out of here. Like, I was born at night, not last night. Got me fucked up. It was a flop, and like I said, only helped CM Punk out as his name was buzzing again and the Bucks were being clowned again. AEW would never recover from this event. This would basically be the nail in the coffin for the company, as I believe AEW was dead and this was just spreading the ashes. So here we are today, and that was the last of the drama as far as I know from the outside looking in. Punk has taken quite a few shots at AEW since he left, which he's basically earned that. Basically, I can't get mad at him for that. Everything he went through with that company and probably still going through today. Yeah, he's going to take his shots. Punk is embroiled in the best feud, or now that this is being recorded, the feud is over, but the best feud of 2024, Drew McIntyre versus CM Punk. Argue with your mama, argue with a wall. Maybe the greatest feud of the decade, who knows? But I think it's a strong contender. So Punk is still doing great work, and it seems like he'll be in the title picture soon versus Gunther. So obviously I'm happy. Teenager Coma Mikey is just happy to hear Cult of Personality with the It's Clobbering Time behind it. Punker looks better than ever and seems to be at peace for the first time in his wrestling career, even fulfilling something that's been a passion of his with him since the beginning of his career, which is reaching down and pulling people up with him. It's been beat to death, but his work in the developmental is highly praised. It's been rumored that NXT will be passed down to CM Punk when Shawn Michaels is done with it. And I can't be happier for CM Punk, the person and the wrestler. As for AEW, they did get the media rights deal that they wanted. They got a whopping $170+ million a year. Turns out that may not be for what they're going to do, but what they have done, as their entire catalog will be on HBO Max, or just Max now. Starting in January, you will be able to find CM Punk's entire AEW run on one platform, so that's great for them. But on the other hand, ticket sales are still down, merch sales are still down, they still have terrible merch, and they just hit an all-time low on AEW Dynamite ratings. I believe I think they had 300K for an episode of Dynamite, and to put that in perspective, when Punk was there, or even before Punk, they were in the upper 900,000s and sometimes hitting 1 million. 3 to 5 years later, you can't even crack 500,000. And on a regular basis, they can't crack 700,000, often being in the higher 600,000s or in the mid 600,000s now. They're not even beating NXT, WWE's developmental brand. I will point out that other than the back catalog for AEW being on HBO Max, we know none of the details of this raise, and it seems unlikely that a company doing so bad in all metrics would get a raise to that degree without something being lost in that's highly coveted, like more ownership. It's like heavily speculated that Warner Bros. Discovery kind of basically owns AEW. Again, we don't know because AEW is a private company, unlike WWE, so all we could do is speculate. I'm not a billionaire, I'm not a millionaire, but I can't imagine a company that is doing all-time low ratings, all-time low ticket sales, all-time low merch sales is getting a raise that significant. AEW, for the first time, is now profitable. They've built new stars and some of my new favorite wrestlers, such as MJF, Will Ospreay, Kyle Fletcher, Swerve Strickland, etc., complemented by veterans and Hall of Famers such as Edge, Christian, Jim Ross. MVP just debuted, so maybe now Bobby Lashley isn't too far away, and complemented by Shelton Benjamin. AEW of old to me is dead, because the revolution is dead. But that doesn't mean AEW can't succeed It's just time for a new era. And that's okay. WWE went through many eras, as we all know. Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression Era, the highly criticized PG era, and now the most successful era of all time, Triple H era. It's time for a rebuild, but you can't rebuild making the same mistakes of old. Treat the CM Punk time as a lesson. Although you fumble may be your biggest star ever, take it as a learning lesson. Tony Khan, I'm talking to you. This is a plea right now to Tony Khan. I hope he's listening. Actually, I know most likely he's listening because he takes advice from his biggest fans on YouTube. And I know you watch this. I know you be on social media as much as anybody else. So this is for you. I don't know much, but I do know, and I think it's common sense. You cannot have stubborn people who are not willing to learn, who has never been successful or even participated in success, be higher ups in your business. Although business should be respectful in a collaboration of passion for what you love, the business has to come first. Stop hiring your friends to do the work of professionals. It's okay to not be a leader, Tony. Tony Khan, you are not a leader, and that is okay. Hire someone and let it be known they are the leader to keep the locker room in check. Even Vince McMahon had The Undertaker. Tony Khan, you're not a good booker. It's time to give up booking. You can make amazing matchups, but if every match is a 30-minute Dave Meltzer banger, who cares? If there are no stakes, who cares? No good stories, who cares? And one last thing. This whole we're not WWE shtick isn't working. We get it. You're not them. And that worked when they sucked. But now WWE is pretty good. They're not perfect. I would even say they're not great, but they're good. Take from them what people love and what works for them and apply it to AEW. Dismiss what people hate from them and what doesn't work and keep it far away from AEW. They have half a century head start and we don't expect you to be neck and neck with them in half a decade. But that also means there are half a century of mistakes, scandals, and fuck-ups that you can learn from. I'm rooting for AEW. We absolutely need AEW. Don't believe me? Look at Punk. Although Punk has said there was a chance he would have gone back to WWE in 2019, but it fell through and Nick Khan has always wanted him back there, Vince McMahon really didn't want him there. So if there was no AEW, I don't believe we would have seen CM Punk in wrestling until about late 2022 or early 2023. And a lot can happen in a year and a half, as I've explained throughout this video. So if all of this could happen in a year and a half, imagine if Punk just within that year and a half just says, fuck it, I want to stick to acting. Fuck it, I want to do this. I want to do that. And he just never returns to wrestling. We may never have Punk back in wrestling if it wasn't for AEW. And outside of that, imagine a wrestling business without MJF, without Darby Allin, without Samoa Joe. Where would FTR be if they didn't have a home for the last 4 years? And maybe they need to get out of there now, but the point still stands. AEW has provided more jobs for cameramen, stage assistants, producers, editors, etc., etc. There is a lot of good foundation in AEW being held back by the ineptitude of the top. I know someday they will prosper. We just really need to get through those certain few. And I remember 2018, and I remember 2017, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, etc., etc. And I would really like to never go back to a one company wrestling business again. So AEW, please get your shit together. You fumbled your biggest star ever, and that's okay. You got the infinite money glitch. You will survive. But surviving was never the goal. Competing was the goal. Stop booking for the sickos, book for everyone. Because whether we would like to admit it or not, we need AEW.